HBR Talk with Hannah Wallen. In its October 10, 1993 article, Rape, the Making of an Epidemic, the Toledo Blade described Joe Biden citing the Feminist manufactured 1 in 5 statistic as an argument while promoting his Violence Against Women Act on the Senate floor. According to Bonnie Campbell, former director, Office on Violence Against Women, Biden wrote the bill years before it passed. Every year, she states, he'd try to get hearings and try to get it passed, but the votes weren't there to even get it out of committee until President Clinton's election. She went on to falsely cite the Clinton administration as the very first time our government has, quote, spoken to issues of violence against women. Her statement completely glossed over the apparently inconvenient existence of an older federal law addressing intimate partner and sexual violence, the Family Violence Prevention and Services Act of 1984, signed by Ronald Reagan, which established arrest guidelines, shelter funding, and a 24-hour hotline for domestic violence victims. That bill passed following discussion that goes back at least to the 70s. In fact, VAWA was actually written as an update to FVPSA, as stated in the original bill. It changed the language of the law to presume perpetrators male and victims female, and changed policy to align with the now discredited Duluth model for addressing domestic violence. It funded training for law enforcement, prosecutors, and court personnel based on that model. It used funding restrictions to mandate gendered arrest, prosecution, conviction, and sentencing standards that infringed on the due process rights of accused men, and made it dangerous for men abused by female partners to file police complaints against their abusers. It allowed for shelters and the related assistance to become gender exclusive, so that even if they weren't arrested for reporting their abusers, male victims had no assistance in escaping their relationships. That law and its subsequent reauthorization updates are Senator and former Vice President Joe Biden's political legacy. Another fact that I don't think anyone else has pointed out is that this bill was signed into law in September of 1994 by then-President Bill Clinton, who was fighting against a sexual harassment lawsuit filed by Paula Jones 4 months earlier in May. Feminists were strangely silent about that case, and there was a lot of speculation from establishment Republicans and commentators like Rush Limbaugh that this was because Clinton was a defender of abortion. I don't think that's what was going on. Abortion had just survived 12 years of Republican administrations. It wasn't going away, and if it had been attacked during a second Bush senior term, that would have simply been campaign fodder for the Democrats. The Violence Against Women Act was another story. As we discussed in the Feminist Advocacy Research Scam and a few other past HBR Talk episodes, VAWA's funding creates a particular job market for feminist ideologues, including administrators of women's shelters and the advocates who work for them. Knowing that funding was at stake, the movement couldn't afford to have anything tip the scales against that bill. Even Gloria Steinem was willing to maintain her silence until 1998, when she wrote an op-ed for the New York Times in which she downplayed the accusations against Clinton. In 1994, Steinem knew as well as anybody that the numbers being used to promote that bill were fake. She's the publisher who, quote, discovered Kent State professor Mary P. Koss, creator of the survey method from which those statistics were garnered. In 1987, Steinem sponsored a national survey using Koss's methods and published the results in Ms. Magazine. The statistic cited by Senator Biden in his arguments in favor of the bill was the rape statistic from that survey, which also spawned the more widely cited 1 in 4 stat that combined rape and attempted rape into a single category. So in 1994, when logic and reason weren't going to get the gender-neutral FVPSA replaced with the gender-exclusive, financially exploitable VAWA, feminists threw purported intimate partner and sexual violence victims under the bus to protect the politicians most likely to push it through. Clinton was accused of long-term, sustained sexual harassment in the workplace. If they were willing to ignore that for the benefit of VAWA, what else might they have been willing to tolerate? Today, things have changed dramatically for Senator Joe Biden. A quarter of a century after his Senate battle to get it passed, VAWA is firmly entrenched in American federal law. It has been reauthorized repeatedly, with several expansions to its policy stipulations and funding over time. To legislators, it is no longer a question of whether this should be the law. The possibility of returning to the gender-neutral standards of FVPSA isn't even under discussion. The two major parties only argue over the ways in which VAWA should be expanded. In the age of Me Too, a one-man Believe Woman crusade is unneeded. Feminists have all of Congress and half of the general population indoctrinated to believe their statistics and the dogma they're used to support. For months, the senator has been the butt of a lot of jokes about his own behavior toward women, which appears terribly socially awkward at best and is being labeled creepy with increasing frequency. It seems that he has a decades-long habit of being photographed or spotted on video in the midst of awkward displays of affection toward women and toward children of both sexes. Now, 4 women have come forward to accuse him of inappropriate touching. Caitlin Caruso says he put his hand on her thigh and hugged her too long. DJ Hill says he put his hand on her shoulder and slid it down her back. Amy Lapos accused him of pulling her close to rub noses with her. Lucy Flores, his first accuser, says he put his hands on her shoulders, sniffed her hair, and planted a slow kiss on the back of her head. Biden's apparent handsy nature has spawned memes and one-liners all over social media, though some of the images being circulated are of obviously consensual touching, one woman leaning in for a kiss, another sitting on his lap. Stephanie Carter, the subject of a screen grab from a video in which Biden appears to be behaving similarly to the description given by Lucy Flores, has come forward to say that the image is being mischaracterized. In her Medium.com post, The Me Too Story That Wasn't Me, she explains that, in the moment, she was nervous due to having fallen on ice earlier in the evening, and felt her appearance wasn't up to snuff. Biden had leaned forward to offer her words of support, and that is how she took the entire interaction. She is appalled that the moment is being used to imply any impropriety. Senator Chris Coons has also explained the similarly viral image of Biden's conversation with his daughter Maggie. According to Coons, Biden was praising Maggie and had offered to introduce her to his daughter so that the two girls could, quote, talk about the challenges of having a parent in politics. Coons added that his children view Biden as a grandfather figure. While this statement did not come from Maggie Coons, she has not spoken up to contradict it. The key, then, may not be in Biden's intentions, but in different women's reactions to his attention. It's entirely possible that he's too clueless to notice when someone is put off, and that everyone around him who is has been too polite to tell him. Still, the vultures are circling. His colleagues in the Democratic Party and their supporting media outlets have begun running with the narrative, most taking great care to pay homage to the Believe Women mantra, while also trying to cover their political butts in case Biden decides to campaign for nomination as the party's presidential candidate and manages to win it. While some are taking the position that he should not run because the allegations make him vulnerable to criticism, party leader Nancy Pelosi has said this shouldn't disqualify him. That hasn't placed him above her criticism, of course. Tuesday, The Guardian reported that she has warned him to change his habits. The Republican response seems equally divided, with creepy Uncle Joe comments floating around Twitter and the president, whose own campaign was similarly targeted with allegations of impropriety, taking a few jabs during a rally this week. Fox News commentators' talking points mostly seem to be based around claiming to be holding judgment for more information, while acknowledging that some of Biden's documented public behavior looks hard to explain. A few mention their own experiences with Biden's similarly awkward but in their cases harmless displays of affection as evidence against ill intent on his part. The exception was Tammy Bruce, former president of the Los Angeles chapter of the National Organization for Women, who highlighted the description Lucy Flores gave when discussing her allegations, drawing a clear distinction between affection and inappropriate touching, and accusing Biden of having restrained women in order to engage them. She also pointedly stated that there's a problem with an interaction, quote, if you have to restrain someone. It's a valid point, if it's proved that that's what he did. But at this point, we only have accusations to go on. Is much of the right-wing media honestly skeptical? It seemed so Monday night, but their responses are migrating toward condemnation as more accusations emerge, despite a lack of supporting evidence for any of them. It's not like they are above lobbing the same kind of accusations many of them started out criticizing in this instance. While many commentators are good at bringing up the innocent until proven guilty standard, it doesn't always stop them from calling for judgment in a court of public opinion when it's convenient. Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown experienced this when his opponents promoted a narrative around old domestic violence allegations against him, even after the supposed victim publicly admitted that she had fabricated them during their divorce because she was angry. It's not hard to view the dramatically different narrative on Biden's situation as a similarly politically expedient choice. Of course, everyone facing an accusation deserves fair treatment, rather than the rush to judgment we usually see when accusations like those leveled at Biden are made. Every man doesn't get such a level response, however. Should your average guy who is not in a position of political influence and can do nothing for the feminist movement face similar criticism, his intentions and the nature of his actions will not be the subject of this kind of debate. In fact, he doesn't even have to be as overtly awkward as Biden. All he has to do is be guilty of greeting the wrong woman while relatively unattractive, poor, and powerless, or in a position that provides her with something to gain from targeting him. As Tammy Bruce pointed out in her take on the controversy, if the average man engaged in the same behavior as Biden at work, he'd be fired. That's partly what Joe Biden's Violence Against Women Act is for, to remove the presumption of innocence where other men are concerned. The feminist push for that has included some very public efforts to demonize men in general as sexual predators. At the time that VAWA was under consideration, campus feminists were holding Take Back the Night rallies and running fake wanted poster campaigns labeling innocent male students potential rapists. They spent decades subjecting students to ideology-based rape prevention workshops and classes with an anti-male bias as part of their freshman curriculum, and they've gone through a variety of poster campaigns, including some suggesting that men are just rapey animals in general and need to be taught not to rape women so women can interact safely with them. Websites like ihollaback.com achieve that gender-wide smear with unverified pseudo-victim narratives. 10 Hours Walking in Neighborhood X videos are designed to convince the viewer that harassment is common. In the wake of the now crumbling case against Harvey Weinstein, the Me Too movement involving similarly unverified victim narratives has similar designs. Feminist commentators smear involuntarily celibate men as creepy and dangerous for wanting women's attention, and men going their own way as misogynistic for having the audacity to reject it. It's all about the implications, which to the victim identity cult are the same thing as concrete proof of malice. You plebs who can't do anything for the Steinheims of the world do not get the benefit, temporary as it is, of the feminist political sugar daddy blind spot. You get thrown under the bus right away, even if you've done nothing wrong. Any argument against this will get you accused of hating women, or wanting to beat and rape women, or possibly both. And Biden? Like Bill Clinton found out during the initial Me Too frenzy, since feminists have new blood to work with, his ticket is punched, and his time is probably up. I suspect that feminist leadership has a favorite already picked out for the next presidential election, and it's probably not him. If he gets in the way instead of bowing out, I predict a feeding frenzy leading up to the primary. If he wins in spite of it, another frenzy may come from the other side. Thus begins the first round of election season sexual misconduct allegations, and it's not even halfway through 2019 yet. It's going to be a long one. Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 79, Uncle Joe and the Secret of the Double Standard. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with She Who Must Be Obeyed, Karen Strawn, and Nonsense Annihilator, Lauren B., ready to dismantle the Me Too rumor mill again. But first, as usual, we got a couple of things to go over. Melanie Cox's petition to revise the FBI's rape definition to include the stipulation that it includes being forced to penetrate in any of the ways described in the current definition is now over 1,000 signatures, but that's not nearly enough. There is a link to that petition in the low bar of this stream for anyone who wants to head over and sign. Please do go sign if you can, and even if you can't sign, please share the petition on social media so that others can see it and sign it. I'm going to make the same point as I did last time. A standard that only goes one way isn't a standard. It's a weapon. And we don't want there to be a weapon like this for one sex to use against the other with impunity. So this is really important. And the other end of it is we don't want one sex to be able to commit violence against the other with impunity either. And it would be really nice to see this become a standard and to see it become a reasonable standard rather than having, one-way sexual violence laws and one-way sexual violence responses. And even though the FBI definition isn't the law, the courts do rely on it. And if we can't get a concession from the government on that, it would at least be really nice to force them to admit they're not going to do that, to admit that they're preserving this as a weapon, so that we can address that attitude, because that needs to be public if it's the case. And with that said, as always, if you haven't already, also head on over to badgerfeed.com and register to receive notifications if you want to know what's going on with the Badgers. If you want to support our work, even in the midst of all of the financial blacklisting and all of the social media blacklisting, go on over to badgerfeed.com as I stumble over my own tongue, and go on over to feedthebadger.com and set up your financial assistance. That's the most stable way to help us. It's more stable than Patreon. It's more stable than any other kind of direct payment. So there you go. So remember, information is power, and we have it. Go on over to Badger Feed for information, and Feed the Badger to support and help our sharing of that information. Speaking of sharing information, don't forget to smash that like button and share us on every social media site you use. Grab some popcorn, throw open the gates of reason, and unleash your friendly neighborhood badgers on normie society. It'll be fun. And the last thing is, as with any breaking news, this story has evolved since the recording of the opening monologue. 3 more women have made accusations, but all of them are now saying, well, Biden's behavior wasn't sexual harassment, it was just clueless and insensitive. Because, that always gets other guys out of trouble, right? Being clueless and insensitive totally doesn't make them rapey. Oh, wait. Yeah, it does. So the Me Too thing is just ridiculous. The double standard is bigger than ever. And yet it's looking like it's still going to keep him out of the race. Now, if this decades-long known behavior, because they've been talking about this as a known behavior the whole time. Oh, yeah, he's always done this, right? That's not keeping feminists from working with him. Feminists were willing to work with him and Clinton just fine during the 90s. What reason can they possibly give why the public should trust any candidate they endorse today?
Well, because me too.
Yeah, and they don't need an excuse because they have an agenda, and that is the issue. They are using him to push their feminist agenda, and it's unfortunately, as some people could have predicted, it is backfiring spectacularly. It's always, and if you notice, it's always the people who are the biggest proponents against the thing, who are the most guilty of that thing, right? Every time you hear like a religious person saying, oh, how bad it is to touch children, you find out they're a pedophile. Like,
I just want to say, okay, here we go. Here's why feminists might endorse him, right? And might have been willing to work with him. This is from a transcript of the hearings when he introduced the Violence Against Women Act in December of 1990. And he says, in my house, being raised with a sister and 3 brothers, there was it was a nuclear sanction. If under any circumstances, for any reason, no matter how justified, even self-defense, if you ever touched our sister, literally, not figuratively, literally, my sister, who is my best friend, my campaign manager, my confidant, grew up with absolute impunity in our household, and Mr. Buell said she was a blessed woman, and Biden replied, and I have the bruises to prove it. I mean that sincerely. I am not exaggerating when I say that. Now, what feminist wouldn't love that man?
well, yeah, he's got the scars to prove it, right?
Well, they must have really loved him.
His sister had carte blanche to do whatever the fuck she wanted, and if any of he or either of his brothers lifted a finger in self-defense, they would be, I don't know whether the bruises were from his sister or from his parents when he hit back, right?
Oh, no doubt from his sister.
He has the bruises to prove that his sister acted with absolute impunity and that retaliating or defending himself was subject to a nuclear sanction on the part of his parents. That is the way he was raised. Now, what feminist wouldn't love that? What feminist would not love that? And here's the thing. After he said, and I have the bruises to prove it, the entire hall erupted in laughter.
That's not surprising either. And in terms of feminists, they must have really loved him, because at the time that the Violence Against Women Act was under consideration, like I said in the monologue, the lawsuit, Paula Jones lawsuit was filed in May, but the discussion of that lawsuit had already started in, if I remember right, 93. She'd already done news interviews, and of course there was already the Jennifer Flowers thing, which that was openly consensual, but the reason that she released the tapes was that she stated she feared for her life. She thought there would be retaliation and of a deadly nature. And yet, to get what they wanted from Democrat politicians, which was not the first domestic violence law, right? Not the first American federal response to domestic violence either, because the Family Violence Prevention and Services Act of 1984 predates the Violence Against Women Act of 1994 by what? 10 years, right? So that was already there. There were already shelters. There was already a 24-hour hotline. There were already guidelines that told police that just because an assault happened between a married couple or people living together doesn't mean it's no longer an assault. That stuff was all in place. The stuff that the selling points for the Violence Against Women Act were already in existence.
All of that stuff was already in existence in state law.
Right.
Starting in the 1600s.
Right. And so there was literally nothing, no reason whatsoever for them to sacrifice their principles to fight for the Violence Against Women Act, unless they wanted to gender domestic violence law federally to exclude men from consideration and assistance and women from accountability. That's it. That's the only goal that was left.
Yeah, and look at Biden. He's like, I was raised in a household where men were excluded from assistance and women could offend with impunity. And I'm proud of that. And I think it's, I have the bruises, the battle scars to prove it. Ho, ho, ho.
Yeah,
right?
Michael Eric Dyson said the same thing in the last Monk debate, basically, that he grew up in a household full of women and men never got the last word. He didn't say anything about getting bruises for having the last word, but he just wasn't allowed to have the last word because he lived in a house full of women.
This is what Tommy Sotomayor talks about. He was on the Rubin Report, and he described it just beautifully, right? When you have an intact family, a mother and a father raising their children together, what you have is a team. But when you have a single mother, what you have is a dictator. Mm-hmm. And the dictator, he said, when he was growing up with his single mother, she beat him. She beat him, and he thought it was normal because all of his friends who all had single mothers were all getting beaten too, right? And he said, you had that thing with there was a viral video of one of the riots. I don't know, maybe it was in Baltimore or maybe Ferguson, right? And there was a viral video of a black mother, finding her kid participating in this riot and grabbing him by the ear and frickin' cuffing him upside the head a bunch of times and beating on him and everything. And everybody was saying, oh, what a great woman. She's like, that's like, you go girl, you're doing the right thing by your kid.
No.
And he's like, no, because that's the way she probably behaved every freaking day. Probably
Exactly.
beat on him every freaking day.
And if it worked, he wouldn't have been participating in the riots in the first place.
If he had a father at home, he would know how to discipline himself to not be out in a public setting like that, lashing out unrelentingly. So,
I've seen a difference depending on the mom as well. Like most single moms, you do see that. You see they resort to violence because they don't know how to speak with authority. But I knew one woman who did, when I was in college, and this was like, I sort of experienced her means of keep getting her kid under control, and she didn't lay hand on him to do it. She used the God voice, and the God parent, the parental God voice, just sort of like floors you when another parent uses it. Well, I wasn't a parent at the time, but her kid had hit that age where they test out no, and I don't think he had done it before. And because she was shocked. I think he was testing the waters because there was a white lady in the house, right? So you're going to be nicer in front of this white lady because she's polite company, right? So she tells him to do something, and he stomped his foot and crossed his arms, and he goes, no! And she turned around, and in this, like, her whole demeanor changed, and she just, you don't tell me no! I am your mother! And the kid just froze. Like, oh. And it was like, that was it. He was good. The whole rest, nothing. The kid never had a bruise on him. I never saw her rough with him. She just expressed her authority.
Yeah.
And she demanded respect.
Other than the occasional swat to the seat of the pants through a diaper, which doesn't even freaking hurt. Never even made my kids cry. Right? But, when they're going for the 5th time with the butter knife toward the electrical socket,
you gotta do something.
Yeah.
You cannot let your child fry himself to death. That is not okay.
I always figured, if the natural consequences are more severe than the artificial ones that you give them, then go ahead and give them the artificial consequences, right? And you do it a few times, right? You scale upwards, but then the fifth time, you know what? You can swat the seat of their pants, and it just would startle them, right? But other than that, I have only ever resorted to like an actual violent thing with any of my kids once. And that was when my youngest, when he was, I think, 8 or 9, stole $200 out of my wallet and took his bike and went with his friend and spent it all at Walmart before I even got up on a Sunday morning. I was like, oh, I don't have to work till noon. I can sleep in till 8:30. Well, by 8:30, he was already gone and the money was spent. And he had to cross the street. He knew he wasn't allowed to cross in order to get to the Walmart to get his ill-gotten gains. And, this was following weeks of him acting out and being miserable and horrible and whatever. And the physical nature of the punishment was only a portion of the punishment. And the craziest thing about it was that I literally stood over him and I said, you think because there's no dad in the house that I don't have the balls to teach you right from wrong? Well, I'm here to teach you otherwise. Right? And I grounded him. This was a kid who was out and about. He was like a feral kid. He wanted to be outside all the time. He was out running with his friends all the time. Right? It was the middle of summer holidays. And I grounded him for 3 weeks. And that was the happiest 3 weeks he ever spent. He was just like, he was good with his siblings. He was helpful around the house. He was just like, he needed a boundary. He needed a boundary. He needed somebody to put their foot down and say, this far, no further. Right? And I did that in a very spectacular way. It wasn't just the grounding for 3 weeks. It was also, that was the money I was going to spend on your birthday present. And now all of that stuff you bought is going in the garbage because I'm not going to look at it and be reminded that my kid is a thief. And so I hope you got a lot of play value out of it over the last 2 hours, because that's all you're going to get. And but I wasn't planning on spending $200 on you for your birthday. And so you're going to earn the rest of that back eating bologna sandwiches while the rest of us have chicken wings and pizza, right? Whenever we get takeout, you're not getting any of it. You're going to eat bologna sandwich, right? And that until you earn it back. Earn back what I would have spent until, the excess of what I would have spent on you for your birthday. And that's what's going to happen, son. Because you were caught 3 times stealing money out of my wallet, and you were caught before you could spend it.
Consequences are the making sure the kids understand the consequences. That seems to be the best discipline, regardless. And that was the thing that ended up happening in this, the situation I just described too.
He was caught 3 times before he could spend the money. And then he managed to spend the money, and that was when I was just like, okay, I actually have to do something about this.
Yeah.
And it was a complete readjustment.
So that was the same thing with.
He was a happier kid.
That was the same thing with me when I busted my neighbor's window with a walnut that I knocked out of a tree I wasn't supposed to climb. It was just this ridiculous series of accidents. I climbed up the tree, and the branches didn't break because I didn't climb up to the high enough branches where they would. But the tree itself wasn't really that big around. I mean, walnut's a really hard wood, so it feels like it's really stable even when it's just a few inches across, right? Just maybe 6 inches thick. But as you get up closer to the top, it's actually really flexible. And so it's like swaying back and forth, and I'm starting to come back down, and I put my foot on a branch, and it wasn't going to work. And I shook loose not that branch itself, but a piece on it that was dead, and that hit walnuts, and when the walnuts came cascading down, and one of the walnuts bounced off another branch and some other things, and then went crashing through the window. So it was like fate was out there waiting to punish me for, you didn't do what your father said, you didn't stay out of that tree. And of course, it was the same thing. I felt really awful about what happened, and the punishment actually gave me a way to redeem myself. I could earn the cost of replacing the window, and in the end of it, I was very proud of having gone through the rehabilitative process, I guess you could say, of owning my shit. And I was still really sorry for screwing up my neighbor's bathroom window, and everything, and I was embarrassed at the mistake I had made, but I, fixed it. And I wasn't going to go up in that tree again. But, and the kid that I was talking about earlier, once he realized, you could see as soon as he mouthed off to his mom, and then he looked at me, and he was a little embarrassed at having done it, and then she put him in his place as a kid. I am the mother, you will do what I say. And he did the whole yes ma'am, and it was almost a military yes ma'am. And that was the end of that. And the rest of the time that we spent together on the way to class and everything, he was just animated and cheerful and very lovey-dovey with his mom, and just like a little kid is.
The thing with kids is that they need to realize that they have boundaries, because they don't feel safe without boundaries, and they don't feel like you care about them if you don't provide boundaries, right? So if a kid says to you, I'm going to ride my tricycle on the roof, and you say, okay, right? What they're hearing is, I don't love you enough to make sure you're safe.
Right.
Exactly. And this is an argument that I had with a couple of my employees. I mean, there are several instances where this has happened, but like there was one specifically where I had an employee who was working on a day when he was not scheduled to be working, and no one knew that he was back there working, but he didn't say anything to anyone. And my job as his employer, as his boss, I need to know if he's there, because if something happened while he was back there working, no one would have known. So I'm responsible for that, right? But he needs to be told that, listen, you can't just do whatever it is that you want to do. You have to come and let someone else know. You have to be accountable, because I'm accountable. If something happens to you, then I'm accountable as well. So I'm finding this it's happening a lot with these young guys. Like they just do whatever they want to do. They just think that they can do whatever and not have to be accountable for their actions. But no, if you're employed here, then you have to follow a specific set of rules, just like everyone else. And you don't get to just go outside of those rules just because I'm the cool boss that won't say anything if you want to do something special on the side,
Right, exactly.
But I have to be, it's difficult because as as lenient as I would like to be with them, I can't. They're not my children, but I am still responsible. But
Well,
it's about accountability, right?
Right, and it's to go back to the feminist end of this. That is exactly why they liked Joe Biden and Bill Clinton, because those men could not hold them accountable. They couldn't hold them to the truth. They couldn't hold them to the facts. They couldn't place any limitations on what feminists would demand of them, because feminists had leverage with them. And at the other end of it, feminists didn't hold those men accountable because they were giving feminists what they wanted. And so what you had was this lack of accountability spiral. And while you have people who want to do well in life, people who want to go somewhere with their lives, to have success, to have greatness, to just even have happy families, they want that accountability from early on in their lives. And whether we're talking, single mother households where the kids do not have accountability, or households with
and keep in mind the mothers don't. The mothers in single mother households don't have accountability either.
No, they don't. So how are they going to teach it? But you also have the uber progressive end of, there's not really a lot of accountability to the individual citizen from a political ideology that sees the regular citizen as a pseudo child that needs the government to take care of them and tell them what to do and make sure they're okay and all that stuff. And that lack of accountability is inherent in the policies that these guys pushed. And so what you have with feminists is they gravitated toward that. And they did pretty much throw all of the accusers under the bus. Clinton's accusers, who, whether they were telling the truth or not, the whole story was not really given a proper hearing by any side of the political spectrum. The Republicans just wanted to use it against Clinton, and the Clinton supporters just wanted to make it go away. Nobody wanted to actually investigate and find out, did somebody lie about him? Are they being held accountable for those lies? Did he actually do what he was accused of? Is he being held accountable if he did? None of that. It was just, the whole thing was nothing but political fodder. And the one group that should have come out for accountability in that situation was feminists. And they didn't. They not only did they not, but they threw those accusers under the bus as a sacrifice in order to remove personal accountability for women and remove assistance for men from domestic violence law.
Well, that's what I, like that user on Reddit named Demon Spawn, he put it very succinctly. First wave feminism was about giving women men's rights without men's responsibility, and second wave feminism was about removing women's responsibilities, and then third wave feminism has been about putting more responsibility on men, right? And that's really how I see it. It's how I see the evolution of the movement. Is about essentially putting all of the costs and the obligations on men, and giving women all of the freedom, all of the choice, all of the power, all of the everything, right? All of the benefits without any of the downsides, without any of the trade-offs, without any of the cost column of the spreadsheet, right? Without any of that. Right. And that's what we really see with the Violence Against Women Act. And that, I think, that is what has allowed Biden to get away with some of this behavior. And, you might, like you said in the intro, that there's not a whole lot of evidence, right? But I'm prepared to give Lucy Flores, is that her name? I'm prepared to give her the benefit of the doubt, because this is a pattern of behavior that he's engaged in on camera, right? Repeatedly. It's not something that's out of the norm for him, but it is something that if a woman was sitting in her office working at her computer and her boss came up behind her and put his hands on her shoulders and kind of rubbed them a little bit, and then put his face right next to her ear and sniffed her hair and whispered something in her ear and then kissed the side of her head in an employer-employee setting, this would be like considered beyond the pale.
All right, so
beyond the pale. And I'm watching one of these, right? There was this young girl, maybe 12, 14 years old, right, whose dad was being sworn in. And he kind of manhandles her over to, oh, you're going to stand on this side for the group photo, right? Oh, he grabs her arm and pulls her over. Okay, you're going to hold the book for your dad. And then he grabs her and pulls her over, and you're going to stand on the other side of me, on the far side of me from your parents, right? And I'm going to put my arm on your rib cage, right? Like an inch from your breast. And you can see this girl, right? She's sort of giggling nervously. You can see her kick that knee down, right? That hip down on that side, and kick that shoulder up, right? To expand the area of her midsection where his hand is, to pull her breast further away from where his hand is, right? You can see her responding in a very instinctive, physical way, right? Of dropping a knee, which drops the hip, and kicking her shoulder up to make that space where his hand is as large as possible to keep it as far away from her breast as possible, right? And he's just oblivious. He's oblivious to the fact that he's making her uncomfortable, and her giggling and stuff. Super nervous giggling, right? And I'm just looking at it and I'm going, like, how is he not picking up on this? And so part of me is thinking, like he's passing it all off as, sort of a way of affection and encouragement, right? Physical affection and encouragement. But I'm thinking of it as, after watching family after family after family after family whose family members are being sworn in, and him kind of engaging in this behavior, right? I'm sort of thinking that maybe he's like the silverback gorilla in the room. It's not about sex, it's about owning the room.
It could
right?
be.
And
it could be.
Yeah,
but it also could be that he really is that clueless. Because I've run into people both sexes that are, and he is. If you've ever watched, if you've ever watched video or seen footage of him with guys, he is just as awkward and strange in his touching with guys.
guys.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of like that episode filled with the close talker, right? You know, a bit of a close talker. What do you mean? You'll see, right? And the guy is just like, every time the person leans away, he just leans forward into the newly available space, right? And like, so maybe that's all it is that he's socially oblivious. But the point stands that, you know, in Ontario, there was a series of public service ads that essentially were calling on men in the workplace to speak out about and giving visuals of exactly the same things that Joe Biden has been doing in front of cameras all along. And I can tell you one thing, right? As somebody, like, I have been sexually harassed in the workplace. It is difficult to speak up. You know you're going to make a scene. You know you're going to be the center of all kinds of negative attention. You're going to be the center of a big freaking brouhaha if you do it, if you speak up in the moment. And these are, you know, swearing in ceremonies that are being filmed, right? Everybody knows that they're on camera. Everybody knows that there's an audience there. Nobody wants to say anything, right? If these people are made uncomfortable by it, they're making a scene about it in the moment in front of cameras is only going to make them more uncomfortable. It's only going to, yeah. So it's essentially just like, okay, well, I'll just deal with this for the next 45 seconds and then it'll be done and I don't ever need to think about it again, right? As opposed to speaking up and putting their foot down, right? And then having some big, huge controversy come out of it, right? And so I can really feel for some of the women who I've seen on camera looking genuinely uncomfortable by his touching, right? And did not say anything, didn't do anything, because, you know, what's the point? This is a once every 4-year thing that you might have to go through, is to be in a room with Joe Biden, and so you might as well just put up with it quietly and not cause a stir, not cause a dust up, not make yourself the center of some kind of media controversy because you accused him of making you feel uncomfortable. You're just going to put up with it, you know. And one of the things too that, you know, because I've been asked about this on, you know, sort of conservative talk radio, and I don't know Biden's intent. I don't. Maybe he is just trying to be helpful and affectionate and grandfatherly or whatever. Maybe it's sexual. Maybe it's dominance. Maybe it's just he's socially retarded, right? But I don't know. But what I have said is that George Herbert Walker Bush was raked over the coals in the last months of his life because he put his hand on some women's bums during selfies. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But at least he wasn't running for leader of the free world at the time. He was in a wheelchair and was in a stage of advanced senility. And anybody who works in a nursing home is going to tell you that that's just par for the course.
Yep.
With men who are losing their marbles, right? And so you can't expect him to be in control of his behavior. The dude's fucking senile.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And he's harmless. He's in a wheelchair. There's no way he can corner some woman and force himself on her, right? He can squeeze her bum. He can squeeze her bum during a selfie.
The other thing about that is
the same old off-color joke over and over and over and over again because it's the only one he can remember, right? And his handlers should have dealt with that. His handlers should have been on top of that because it's not his fault, and he's not running for the position of leader of the free world. If Joe Biden is so socially retarded that he doesn't understand what the rules are when he was part of the freaking movement that created these rules.
Right. Well,
he thinks he gets a free pass because he's Joe Biden when no other man would get that pass.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem. They use Trump's claim or that statement 10 years ago or to however many years ago it was of grab him by the pussy, right? They took that and they fucking ran with it like he was the devil incarnate, because Trump exposed the truth that if men have money, fame and power, that women are more eager to sleep with those kind of women or more eager to give themselves up to those types of men, right? So now you have Joe Biden, who you have on videotape touching inappropriately young girls. And they're saying, he was just trying to be father. You know what I mean? They're trying to make every excuse in the book for anything that Joe Biden has done on video. But at the same time, these are the same people who they lost their shit over grab them by the pussy.
See, personally, I don't think the standard should be if you're clueless and nobody ever tells you they're uncomfortable, so you have no means of becoming not clueless, that should disqualify you from something. But at the same time, that's the standard that ordinary men face. Like, Biden is an elite, okay? He's been in politics all his life. I don't even know if he did anything before he went into politics, because I've never heard any history of him prior to politics. I studied his history in politics, but I think he's a lawyer, maybe. I wouldn't be surprised, like most of our legislators are lawyers. And but in any case, so this is a guy who can he can get a pass because he's useful to political pundits and to political lobbyists and so on. That's it. But if the guys that I worked with in different places, if the guys that I worked with at the gas station I worked at were equally clueless, and I did work with a guy who was that clueless. I was the only gal that would hang around with him because I wasn't intimidated or afraid or put off, and I would, if he bothered me, if something he did bothered me, I would say, hey, don't do that. Because you can say that to the next cashier over at the gas station where you work, and he can't retaliate. You can even say it to your boss at the gas station, and they can't retaliate. Under the law, if they retaliate against you, they get in big trouble, the company gets in big trouble, and you can get a big payout. So, for the most part, your limits in that area are nowhere near what they would be in a setting like politics, where you're on camera, not just on camera like you are working at a gas station, but where you're on public camera, and where the individual who you're dealing with has power over law. The individual you're dealing with has influence within the workplace. And, those laws that apply to your boss at the gas station, they don't apply to the congressman. Do you know that the United States Congress had a slush fund to pay off underlings who made allegations of sexual harassment to keep themselves quiet about it? They had a hush fund with our tax dollars. They had a hush fund with our tax dollars for this kind of behavior, right? If you pay taxes, and if you're a guy, you definitely pay taxes. If you pay federal taxes, you have paid to shut someone up who has made an accusation against a United States senator or congressman. Yeah. And yet now this stuff coming out about Biden, he's not useful anymore, right? So they can throw him under the bus. As far as I'm concerned, one more thing. As far as I'm concerned, none of the allegations against Biden that have been made to this point are worthy of any genuine outrage. Even the worst allegation, you can look at that and go, well, you know what, this guy's a dipshit. And the fact that he was able to do this stuff for that long without anybody in his professional circle telling him something. That's an indictment of Washington. But it's not anything near the types of allegations that they made against Clinton, and those were silenced or ignored or poo-pooed by the other side. They got accused of being bimbo eruptions.
Well,
so I don't have any sympathy.
All right, no, and I'm sorry, I'm probably going to divide a bunch of people here, but I don't give a shit. This is the same thing, or we can make some kind of simulation between this and the Michael Jackson allegations of him touching kids, okay? I follow Razor Fist, and I absolutely do not agree that Michael Jackson was a pedophile. I do not, based on the evidence, right? But, okay, so let's juxtapose that with what we are seeing right now with Biden. There is video evidence of this man walking up to young children and touching them. We don't know if there was consent, if their parents consented to him touching their children and smelling their hair and kissing them, but you have video evidence of Biden touching these young girls, and it's just dismissed as though it was so innocent. And I don't agree with that. I do not believe that. I just don't.
I don't, like I said, I don't know Joe Biden's intent with any of this stuff. All I know is that there are several videos of young girls and women sort of being uncomfortable, leaning away, right? Leaning away, trying to increase distance between him and them, right? Yeah. In such a way as to not cause a scene, right? And you're looking at the second most powerful man in the world, in these cases when he's vice president. You're looking at people who are not going to feel like they have the ability, particularly on camera, to make a big stink about any of it, right? And so, like, the fact that, when you look at the feminist narrative, right, where Clinton and Lewinsky, right, and Lewinsky's new narrative, now that she's thought things through the feminist lens, right, because she had always maintained that it was a consensual relationship and that she was an equal participant, and she wanted it every bit as much as he did, and all of this stuff, right? Up until the Me Too movement, when she rethought things through the feminist lens and decided that because he was in a position of power over her, the fact that she entered into an internship with the actual stated goal of getting laid by the president, okay, she literally wanted to nail the president, and she went out of her way to get what she wanted, right? But she's rethought it, and she's decided that he abused his power by allowing her to get what she wanted from him, right? And so we're looking at a completely new way of viewing things through this Me Too feminist lens, where if there is any power imbalance, any kind of power differential going on between the two parties, right? The person in the position of power, if he's male, right, is at fault and is engaging in sexual misconduct, even if what he's doing is accepting the fact that this young intern is climbing me like a fire pole. Okay, well, I guess if she insists, I'll stick my dick in her, right? No, that's not allowed. You must insist. As a man, you have evidence, right? Because if you don't, right, then you have raped her, right? That is where we are now. That is where we're at now. So literally what we have is a situation where the men that are the most attractive to women are no longer allowed to have sex with the women that who are attracted to them and who are pursuing them, because that would be an abuse of their power, right? So we're not doing men a service, we're not doing women a service, because women are going to be denied the sex with the men that they want to have sex with, and men are going to be denied, men of higher status are going to be denied sex altogether under the law, under feminist jurisprudence, right? So we're looking now at this situation with Biden. Well, he was the second most powerful man in the world at the time when he was doing all this shit, right? When he was sniffing Lucy Flores's hair and planting a big old sloppy kiss on the back of her head while he was holding her shoulders so that she couldn't get away without making it obvious. She couldn't discreetly put some distance between them. She would have to actually pull out of his grip. And that's really where I think that that woman from the Now, what was her name, Hannah?
Oh crap! She's a Fox News commentator, and I cannot think of her name off the top of my head.
Yeah,
but it was the Los Angeles former Los Angeles now president.
Yeah, she's essentially saying, and this is what I have witnessed over and over and over again on these videos, is what he first does is he puts his hand on the woman to secure her in place, to make it so that she can't just kind of, move away without making it very obvious that that's what she's doing, right? And that she's obviously rejecting his presence or his touch or whatever, right? And then he moves in and does the Eskimo kiss, right? The rubbing the noses, the putting the forehead together, the sniffing of the hair, the whispering out in the ear, the kissing the side of the back of the head, and all of those things. Right?
Tammy Bruce.
There you go. Yeah, no, she had it. She had it spot on. Is the reason why, and just having watched all of these videos, right? Lucy Flores said that the first thing he did was put his hands on her shoulders, right? And then he leaned in while he had his hands on her shoulders, right? That fixes her in place. That puts her in a position where pulling away is going to be an obvious thing, right? So you're just kind of stuck there going, what the hell, right? And then he leans in and he sniffs the hair and he whispers in the ear and he kisses the hair and all of this stuff, right? And, I'm sorry, this is a little different from kissing the top of a baby's head while they sleep on your chest. This is a little bit different, or sniffing a baby's head, because babies' heads smell wonderful. It's a little different from that. It's you're taking an adult human being and physically restraining them, right? And not in the sense that she couldn't get away if she was desperate enough to do so, but she couldn't actually pull away without making some kind of scene. And this is a man who is in a position of significant power over her, right? And so, of course, she's not going to do that. And, his behavior with touching the men around him and stuff like that, that could all just be silverback behavior as well.
The question is whether it's conscious or whether it's unconscious.
It could absolutely be unconscious behavior. I don't know his motivations. I don't know his intentions. And it could absolutely just be unconscious behavior.
It could even be caused by his history with his sisters.
Yes, it absolutely could be caused by history of being abused by his sister, and then when he retaliates, getting beaten by his parents. Absolutely 100% could be caused by that.
Right, and it doesn't make it the best behavior, it doesn't make it an acceptable thing, but it is something that can be explainable as this is why this happens and how we end up in this position. And of course it still goes back to, as a politician, you have advisors, you have handlers, you have friends and family that see you interact with the public, that anybody who is invested in your welfare, anybody who's invested in your success as a politician, should take the step of saying, hey Joe, this is bothering some of the people that you're interacting with. These are the things that you should be paying attention to determine whether the person that you're interacting with is open to this kind of thing or not. Because, I'm a huggy person. I hug everybody, or at least everybody that seems willing. And, Like, I don't have to restrain people to do that. But I generally notice, if I go to lean in for a hug and the person leans away from me, I don't try to hug them. Because there's a clue there, right? But if I didn't do that, but if I didn't recognize that, I would hope that, Karen would take me aside at some point and say, hey, Hannah, these guys don't want to hug. Don't do that. You can tell because they're leaning away from you. So if you watch and somebody's leaning away from you, don't hug them. Well, somebody obviously never did that with Biden. Yeah. And I think that's really, there's a big difference between, not a big difference between the behavior being clueless and the behavior being deliberate. Not so much in terms of like the reaction from the person it's being targeted at or whatever. But there's a big difference between accusing someone of deliberately preying on people and using the position of power to do it, and someone being clueless. And there's a big difference between how Biden impacts people when he does it and how he gets away with it versus, say, if I were at ICMI and there's a socially awkward guy there doing exactly the same thing that Biden does, you can guarantee that probably half the guys there are going to speak to him about it. And it's not so much that they're going to be like, hey, get out of here, something wrong with you. But they're going to let him know because they're going to know he's clueless, and they're going to know that he's going to get himself in trouble in the rest of the world if he does that. And it's just, it's a thing that, I guess the best way to put it for me is, when people don't communicate their discomfort and they don't communicate to the people around them, hey, I've noticed that you're making this mistake and it's going to have a negative effect on your success. There's usually something else going on there. And that's the thing I wanted to point out with feminists and with the political environment that this all happened in, is that there is an underlying current of, we will put up with anything to get what we want. And so nobody says a thing to the Joe Bidens out there, whether their behavior is deliberate or whether it's clueless. And we know that at least among some politicians in Washington, the behavior is deliberate, because we know that they came up with that hush fund, right? But they're willing to just let it stay, over off in the corner unattended, rather than deal with it in order to get this law or that law passed that they can exploit for political power and money. And that's what feminists did with Biden VAWA. It's what they did with Clinton and VAWA.
Yeah, it's their slush fund.
Well, when you look at it, right, this behavior, it's been like, what, a decade anyway, of it being sort of something that Republicans have criticized him about, right?
Oh yeah, it's been made fun of for at least 10 years.
Yeah,
and it's been going on for 30.
Yeah, Creepy Uncle Joe is a nickname, and this is one of the things too. If the Democrats run him, right, they're going to be so freaking sorry, because Trump has this habit of branding the Democratic candidates, and the Republican candidates running against him, right, in the primary, right? He had low energy Jeb Bush and little Mark Rubio, and you had Lion Ted Cruz, Lion Ted, and you had, right, you had all of these like branding adjectives that he could put in front of the names of the people he was competing against, right? He doesn't even have to come up with one, right? He's got one, Creepy Uncle Joe. Creepy Uncle Joe. Pocahontas. Pocahontas is like,
No.
like he doesn't even have to come up with.
It's Pocahontas.
Yeah, well, but Trump picked Pocahontas. What, you mean Pocahontas? Right? And then some news organization located one of the last living descendants of Pocahontas and asked her opinion of it, and she said
Actually, Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, she thought it was funny, right? She thought it was freaking hilarious, right? You know, like, who the fuck is this bitch claiming to be, like, of Native ancestry? She's as white can be. Like, what the hell, right? But anyway, so you have this situation where you're putting somebody up against a candidate, right, that is really adept. Shush, dog. Oh my God, stop whining. Really adept at negatively branding his competition. And he doesn't even have to come up with a clever adjective for creepy Uncle Joe. It's already been done, right? And he'll just be playing on this, right? And you know, honestly, I think that the Democrats, if they're smart, they'll dump creepy Uncle Joe. They will stop their constant ragging on Tulsi Gabbard as an Assad apologist, because that's not what she is. I've listened to her at length, and she is absolutely not an Assad apologist for saying interventionist regime change wars don't really help the people that we're feeling sorry for, right? They actually make their lives worse, right? We've seen that pattern through history over and over and over again. Here's a woman she's a woman of color. She has a presidential demeanor. She has an impeachable record as somebody who served 2 tours of duty in the military overseas, deployed, right? Well, and you know, but she doesn't play identity politics. You know what? What adjective can you Trump could put in front of her name?
No, none. But here's what I have heard about her is that she had some kind of stance against gay marriage or gay rights. So that's why people are going over it. Even though she is.
So did Obama. So did everybody. Everybody except for Trump. Trump was the guy who didn't have a stance against gay marriage.
Right, but that's exactly why.
In 1990, he freaking.
The thing is that is more likely to get her thrown under the bus by Democrats than actual, you know, Biden's behavior is actually less likely to get him shit canned from the election than coming out against gay marriage historically is going to be to get a candidate shit canned from the election now. It shouldn't be that way, because, like, what are they going to do? The Supreme Court already ruled. They can't undo that. You could run for president and win and oppose gay marriage, and you would be powerless to do anything about it because the Supreme Court already ruled.
But let me tell you something. All of this is just a farce. Okay, we are talking about these Democratic candidates as if they have legitimacy, but they don't. Because I'm sorry, I feel that it's going to be Trump 2020, and I would put my money up against anyone because the Democrats do not have a candidate that is strong enough, that has any kind of legitimate political stance against what Trump is doing that will coagulate the American public towards them to be enough of a force to go up against Trump. I don't see it happening. I just don't see it happening.
But after he wins, he could hire Beto O'Rourke and his flamboyant hand motions to help get Air Force One properly landed.
I can't even watch that guy. I can't even watch him talk. Like,
have you seen the Wire?
If you set him next to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, right, and compare their rhetoric, right, it's exactly the same. Oh, the global warming is our World War II.
Oh, God.
It's
right?
like
they both use that analogy.
It's a scene out of Mean Girls.
I just like I'm looking at like how and okay, I don't know if you guys know Alexandria Cortez and her handlers are now under investigation for dark money.
Yeah, the very thing that she criticized other candidates for during her candidacy, she appears so far to potentially be guilty of.
Yeah, I'd like to direct everybody who's listening to a couple of videos about just Google Mr. Reagan, as in Ronald Reagan, on YouTube, and then search his channel for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or AOC, right? And he's got a part 1, part 2 video about the Justice Democrats, brand new Congress, and all of the shady slush corporations and shell corporations, LLCs, that are backed by a single individual, Zach Exley, who's the son of a billionaire.
Many of which went bankrupt after the election.
Yeah, they went bankrupt because they were selling services to these candidates that they had put out a casting call for. They were like, "Hey, do you want to run for office? Come and we'll back you if you play to the camera well enough, right? If you're attractive enough." And then so they backed them, and they ran all of their PAC money through this LLC that ended up going bankrupt after the elections were over because they were selling their consultant services for under market value, and being able to do that so they essentially sold about $1.12 million worth of consultancy services to these candidates for less than for just under $120,000 altogether.
Because that's what they were created for.
Yeah, and essentially that's against, that's an in-kind donation, right? By the backer of this LLC, who is Zach Exley, who's the son of a billionaire. So he essentially donated way more money than he was allowed to donate under FEC regulations by running it through this LLC that doesn't have the same transparency rules that PACs do in terms of where the money's going and what's being done with it. So so you literally have this these people who Cenk Uygur backed until he fell afoul of. And you know what the plan was too? The original plan was not just to run Justice Democrats as Democrats, but to run, okay, dogs, stop.
Hey, they're not barking.
Yeah, no, they're eating each other. Was to run these candidates as Republicans, okay, in districts where the Republican turnout for the primary is almost nil. You might get 5% of registered Republicans turning out to vote in the primaries. So what they were going to do was convince Democrats in the district to switch parties so they could vote in the primaries, get the Justice Democrat candidate in to run as the Republican, because this is a district where everybody who goes to vote just ticks the candidate with the R next to their name.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so they were going to actually run Justice Democrats, socialists, as Republicans in the general elections. Right? And I'm like, really? And the guy, Zach Exley, said, it's a hack. It's a way to hack the democratic process. And, you know, why shouldn't we hack the democratic process to take over the government?
Right. It's not the first time.
Right?
It's not the first time. Back during the Bush, let's see, I'm thinking it was Bush Jr. election. Yeah, it was, because there was a primary, 2000 primary, I believe, that they tried to do this. And what they were trying to do was get McCain to be the candidate instead of Bush. And now, by the way, the campaign finance law that they are violating was the McCain-Feinstein. I think it was McCain-Feinstein. It might be McCain-Feingold. I might have the wrong Fine. But it was essentially a moderate, so-called moderate Republican who I've kind of felt for a long time like McCain was a moderate Democrat in Republicans' clothing, because he voted with the moderate Democrats more than he voted with the Republicans. But in any case, they wanted him to be the candidate because they thought they could beat him easier. And there was this discussion, essentially, and it was Rush Limbaugh that drew attention to it. He's the one that made the accusation public of Democrats switching over to the Republican primary, before the primary, to the Republican Party, to vote in the Republican primary to keep Bush Jr. out of the running, and actually get McCain in as the candidate, so that the opposition could beat him because he would be an easier. And even after all of that, right? Even after all of that, so Catherine Scully says it's McCain fine gold. Terrell 070 also says, or Terrell 070 also says fine gold. So in any case, they ran him later, and lo and behold, he lost.
Yeah, I just don't see a viable Democratic opponent to Trump. I just don't see.
Tulsi Gabbard would do it. She could, but the Democrats are never going to run her because she's too sensible. She's too fucking sensible.
Well, the thing is,
what it is.
You'd have to get a Republican candidate, or a Democrat candidate, sorry, that some Republicans would vote for. And
exactly.
The Democrats
a lot of Republicans would.
And here's why.
No.
The Democrats are demonstrating right now that their party is no holds barred, just basically destroy the existing state of the United States. They've pretty much demonstrated that you cannot trust that they are dealing with you honestly. And they've pretty much demonstrated that all of their standards are double standards. The Republicans aren't necessarily angels or innocent in these terms, and Trump may not be a perfect candidate, but when you look at him, you know what you're getting. And you know that if he says, I want to build the wall, he wants to build the wall. And he's literally tried everything a president can possibly legally do to make it happen. And the only reason it hasn't so far is because he's got people fighting him in Washington to try to keep it from happening. Right? So with that, you've got and he's not actually saying, I want to build the wall, and then he's going to build or do something else and say, well, this is what I really meant, like the Democrats did with health care. So that's, like, people are getting wise to that. And all of this stuff that's coming out about the Democrat Party and the corruption, like, their corruption is pretty much being laid bare right now. And this has happened with Republicans in the past, where, there have been major scandals that they've had to deal with. The scandal with Nixon, the Iran-Contra scandal with Reagan. That's just like, that stuff has come out in the open and ripped up the party. When Clinton was accused, there was a massive reckoning among gay Republicans in office. That a bunch of them got exposed, and it was actually, the Clinton campaign that exposed them. So, like, the Democrats are getting theirs now. And I just don't think that the American public, at least not on the Republican end, anybody that's not a die-hard Democrat, anybody that's not looking for a Democrat candidate to support, I don't think any of them can be convinced to change their support to a Democrat candidate while Trump is running. We would have to have a Republican candidate that is as bad as the Democrat candidates before you could get somebody that's not a Democrat to change their mind.
Exactly. And I will go so far as to say that some of these very, very staunchly pro-Trump people are actually going to turn people against Trump, because Trump is not infallible, right? He's not imperfect. He makes mistakes. But when you have people who are so staunchly behind him, naturally there will be an opposition. And, I'm not going to say that he does everything perfectly. I did vote for him, and I don't agree with everything that he's doing. However, I don't see anyone coming up on the Democratic side that is going to effectively oppose him. And anyone who tries seems to just be doing a detriment to the party as a whole. So, I mean, it's just interesting to see what's happening now politically. Yeah.
I just know the Democrats are Kamala Harris. That's the person they're going to want to run, right? Because they can't run Elizabeth Warren. They can't do that with a straight face with her. All Trump would have to do is show up at his wearing a Warren 1/2024, right? 2024 hat.
Well,
That's all he would have to do.
They can't run Kamala Harris because of the Jussie Smollett controversy that just happened, because they are tied, they are linked, and it is incontrovertible. There's no way that you can separate the two. So if Kamala is seriously thinking about running for presidency, then this is not something that she can run away from, and no one will let her run away from it, and neither should they.
I wonder if they're smart enough to be kicking themselves about not running Bernie Sanders in 2016 now at this point, because if they had a chance.
They had a chance.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they did. They absolutely had a chance with Bernie.
Yep.
They won't have a chance this time around because there's just been there's been too much water under the bridge, and there's been essentially he's like 4 years old now. He's past his prime. They can't run.
Well, there was the hint of a potential Me Too regarding him. Like, I think it sort of got quashed when it started, and it wasn't Sanders himself that was accused. These things happened in a campaign environment and were ignored, and he said the right things, I think, to kind of quash that. But it could easily be resurrected if he competes with the wrong candidate.
Well, all I gotta say is, I hope the Democrats run Beto O'Rourke, because you gotta know, like, the guy is a retard. Okay, he's a retard. After the Mueller came out, said that he firmly believes, absolutely 100% guaranteed, that Trump colluded with the Russians to rig the election and get elected. Right, and that it wasn't just the Russians interfering with the election; they were interfering with Trump and the Trump campaign. Right, absolutely 100%. And he says this after the Mueller was out, announcing there will be no more indictments. Right, and he did so while gesticulating
wildly,
like Zoidberg on Futurama. Right, like he's just like, he might as well have been clacking his paws and going whoop 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 whoop.
I can tell you that there is no actual viable, real candidate for the Democratic candidacy.
Oh, I know, but I think, honestly, he is a somewhat attractive hipster guy who is functionally retarded. I think he's just as dumb.
He's just stoned. Dude, where's my campaign?
Yeah.
Where's your campaign, dude?
Okay, where's your campaign, dude? Just as dumb as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is.
Oh, yeah.
Where she flipped her shit because her Green New Deal that would have required trillions of dollars of retrofitting of every building in the United States with green energy alternatives, right? Within the next 12 years, right? Oh, no, this is something that's totally doable. This is something within the realm of possibility. And if we don't do it, you are sacrificing our children, right? And I'm just like, zero votes, zero fucking votes in favor of her Green New Deal because she's a fucking retard. She has to read everything off of her freaking little tablet because she doesn't actually know anything, right? And frankly, I think with these investigations into her financing shenanigans, right, her campaign finance shenanigans, all she'll have to do is say, well, I don't know nothing about money or economics or the law, and everybody will believe her and she'll get off the hook.
Exactly. What's going to happen is she's going to say that she was just uneducated. She didn't know what the rules were. Sorry, I'm pissing. She didn't know what the rules were, so she should be excluded from any kind of, punitive action.
Yeah, she'll be like, I don't know or about money and like transfers and subsidies. What are those? But you should all listen to me about the economy.
Well, and the other thing that I think is hilarious about her, here she is. She has decided she wants to be a part of the Washington legislative culture, right? She is now a legislator. And she's pissed off about the idea, if she really believes the things that she's saying, and I'm not sure whether she does or if she's just a really good actress. But she's pissed off, supposedly, about Americans sacrificing their children for capitalism, and ignoring this Green New Deal, right? And not she's making a big deal about Americans sacrificing their children. But you know, like, not passing the New Deal is sacrificing your children, but the culture that she has said she wants to be part of, the culture that she has joined, has spent the last, 80 years or so sacrificing the next generation's freedom every year by increasing the federal budget. And increasing the federal debt, and increasing the amount of taxes over the lifetime of their future children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, their great-great-grandchildren. Everybody has to pay that off, right? Everything that is spent by our government. And essentially they've got the biggest credit card in the world, and they are charging it to an account that they will never have to pay, that their children are paying, what their grandfathers charged to it, what their colleagues, their grandfatherly colleagues in office charged to it, and they are now charging it to the names of your and my great-grandchildren. And they're being sacrificed. But she's okay with that. She's fine with that.
She's fine. Exactly, because feminists can't ask a feminist to balance a bank book. They don't understand. They can't quantify the bottom line. So all these lives that are being sacrificed, they don't understand the actual cost of what.
Well, I just want her to ask herself, when she says that you're sacrificing your children for the sake of capitalism, right? I want her to ask, oh wait, she can't because they're all dead. Ask the kulaks about the sacrifice of their children in the name of socialism, in the name of communism, right? In the name of the thing that she wants to bring. Right? But I'm a socialist Democrat. Oh, wait. No, I'm a democratic socialist. I don't know the difference. I just know that they're socialist. Look at Sweden. And it's like, no, Sweden is actually a capitalist mixed economy. Right? That is what Sweden is. It has a free market economy that subsidizes the social programs, and they can only get away with that because they have an largely still, even now, ethnically homogenous population that actually feel a sense of civic duty and work ethic, right? And that even works. Right?
Exactly.
Once you have,
the only way that it can work is if you have a homogenous society. You have to have a population that agree with that ideology.
Yeah, you have to have a population that operates on a similar set of values, right? Not everything, right? There's diversity of opinion, but you have to have like certain values that you hold as, paramount or as important, and you have to actually have a situation where you can spot cheaters and free riders, right? And you can call them out because, like choosing not to work because you don't, and this is one of the things that they removed from the Green New Deal. And they deleted it after we published it too early before we deleted that part, right? Was about paying people who choose not to work. Right? And it's like, really, we should be paying people who choose not to work. Like, I'm happy with supporting people who are physically handicapped, mentally handicapped, people who are incapable. Maybe they have some kind of medical issue, right? Helping them through that, all of those things, right? Helping people out who, single mothers and stuff like that, helping them out, not paying their entire way, but helping them out. Okay, I'm okay with maybe doing that. I'm okay with doing a lot of things to help people out. I'm okay with donating to charity, and if you actually look at it, Republicans donate significantly more to charity than Democrats do. But as a function of their disposable income. But when you're looking at it and you're thinking like, she just wants fucking have everything be free, right? And it like I swear to God, people like her remind me of the woolly bumblebee. Hannah, you'll remember the woolly bumblebee.
Do I have to?
And the woolly bumblebee, after I made calling her out, right, and kind of nuking her from orbit, I had said, and she brags about having university. Well, I'm so happy that my money, right, that I had to pay for her to get 3 university degrees that qualify her to sit in a lawn chair, smoke cigarettes, gestate babies, and collect welfare, because that's what she does, right? And she said, shows how much school here is pretty much free. And I was like, are you dumb? Yeah, you're dumb. You're dumb. It's not free. I'm paying for it.
Right. There was a line.
I'm a taxpayer.
There was a line in the movie McClinic that covered that. John Wayne said the government never gave anybody anything. And it's true. The government never gave anybody anything. The government takes from one group of people and allows another group of people to take what the government sets on the table. But there is no giving. The government, nothing is ever free. There's no such thing as a free thing in this entire world.
The government doesn't have any money. The government is, and every single student in this country, in Canada, right, including, like when you factor in tuition and everything and all of that, every single freaking student in university costs the taxpayer $20,000 a year. Every fucking one, whether they're taking engineering or whether they're taking feminist freaking underwater dance therapy, right? Okay. They're costing the taxpayer $20,000, except medical students. Medical students cost the taxpayer, I don't know, about $75,000 a year, right? And so you're looking at this situation where even if these kids are paying the full amount of tuition,
there we go. Making it up in spades. Hi.
Somebody tested a boundary just a little too hard there, didn't they?
No, my dog. That Kevin was lying on my son's lap, and then she stuck her foot into the crack between the seat and the back of the sofa.
Oh dear.
And got it stuck.
Oh.
But she's okay now.
Poor puppy.
Yeah, well, she's just trying to eat Borat's head.
See, I thought that maybe she got pissed off at Borat. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, no, that wasn't Borat. Borat screams at a much higher pitch.
No, I guess he would. He's a tiny little dog, right?
Yeah, he's not tiny, but he's pretty small. He's like 15 pounds or something like that. He's like a roasting hen.
He can't
ankle
keep
biter.
That's the size he is.
He's not a rat dog. He's an actual lap dog.
Yeah. Well, since the dogs have interrupted, I think this is a good point to bring in the super chats. Before we do the super chats, we do have a comment from French Honey Badger that's not a super chat that I wanna read as well. He says, homogenous population is not enough to make welfare work. It just does not work. Yes, even in Sweden, they had to privatize their system to make it work less badly, but it always rots. It's just they've created enough economic freedom that it's rotting more slowly. That's something that happened here in the U.S. too. When the Medicaid system started costing too much, they privatized it, and in fact, what ended up happening was, you have a choice. Like here in the Dayton area, you have a choice between the actual Medicaid system itself, if you are on Medicaid. I think they call it Molina, and then there's an insurance company that, at least a few years ago, it was CareSource, that instead of the Medicaid system paying your medical bills, if you sign up through the alternative, the Medicaid system pays your insurance premium to the private insurance company, and then the private insurance company pays your medical bills like they would any other, except that they pay the rate that Medicaid pays rather than paying the rate that they would pay if they were insuring you through your employer. So it's an affordable thing for the insurance company because they're paying out less. They're still getting premiums and they're paying out less. And it's an affordable thing for the Medicare or Medicaid system because they're not paying your medical bills. They're just paying a premium. And it seems to have worked out all right. And most people choose the insurance company rather than Medicaid because they offer services that the Medicaid system doesn't. And so it pretty much turns out to be proof that private insurance is far better than Medicaid. It's better to have private insurance than it is to have government insurance because they actually have to market themselves to you, even if they're only competing with government insurance, and which isn't really insurance. It's just, a socialist payment. But that's actually kind of an interesting point, and it slows down the rot. There's still the problem of you're still taking tax dollars from your neighbors to pay your insurance premiums instead of paying them yourself. You're still creating a drain on the system, and you still end up, in the long run, the insurance company isn't going to make the profits on that it would make on, say, somebody that was insured through their employer or somebody that was paying their own insurance premiums. They can't make you have a deductible. They can't limit you the way they would limit a regularly insured person. So you have all these. The system it's enough of an improvement to make the system look sustainable for a longer period of time. But I think eventually that's going to fall apart as well, and then they're going to come up with some other change. Well, we want to do this instead. That they'll think it'll work better, and it's still all pretty much on the backs of men, because it's mostly men that are paying taxes. But yeah, so there are a lot of things they can do to make welfare look like it works, because they're robbing Peter to pay Paul, or they are shoring it up from underneath with other ways of handling money. But in the long run, they're still taking your tax dollars and paying people to not succeed. And my personal opinion on this is, with respect to disabilities and difficulties and everything, any system that we're going to have, if we're going to have a government system, which I'm not sure a government system is the best way to go with any of this, but any system our society is going to have for handling, cushioning people from the worst results of hardship, basically from not being able to come back from hardship, anything that we're going to have, the goal of it should not be to just provide a safety net for people to land in and then let them figure it out from there. The goal of it should be to support people getting back on their feet and becoming self-sustaining again. Because that's the best outcome for anybody, is to be as independent and self-sustaining as possible. That is the most freedom that you can have. Anytime that you have to rely on handouts, you are less free.
Right, and it's also removing the regulations from these companies that are trying to start up. When you place more regulations on companies and who they can and can't hire, that's another layer of this whole thing.
Well, all I got to say is, when I applied for welfare for the whole 6 weeks I collected it, and they looked at my 20-year history of being self-supporting, they bent over backwards for me, especially after I told them, as soon as I'm out of this situation, right? Like, I just have a really, really difficult situation.
Yeah, I wish our system would
do that.
Yeah.
No, you know what they did in our system? They told me to divorce my husband so I could get more benefits.
Well,
and then they told me, they did the same thing. They said, divorce your husband so your benefits won't end. When I went in and said, I don't need this anymore. Things are better. Thank you very much. It was like, oh, well, if you divorce your husband, you can keep collecting.
Oh my God, that's crazy. Like, 'cause, I'm in the welfare office, right? And I'm certain individuals who shall not be described, right, with a baby in the stroller and then a 3-year-old, and because you have to, once your youngest child is 3 years old, you have to start looking for work. So you space your babies out accordingly so that you can stay on welfare, right? And the welfare people, the people at the welfare office, were not very friendly with them, right? But then when I walk up and I'm a strange and I say, well, I've gone on medical leave, but I was working as a waitress, 4-hour shifts, 4 nights a week, and most of my income was tips, and so unemployment insurance is only actually going to give me like a few $100 a month, right? And I'm going to need a top up, right, to get me through this period. And they were just like, they just looked at my record. They looked at my record, 20 plus years of working and being self-sufficient. And they, well, okay, you're in a situation. This is what we're here for. This is what we're actually here for, is to help people like you, right? And so they bent over backwards to get me everything that they put, right? And they were so friendly and so nice. Lauren, was that you?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, shame on. Anyway,
Definitely wasn't me.
Yeah. And like I was just like, well, this is actually a dignified process, like and they said, how long do you figure you're going to be? Well, the doctor gave me the maximum because I asked him to, because I don't know how long I'm going to be in this situation, but the moment I'm out of this situation, I'm going to be back to work. And they were like, okay, well, right. And it was just like super, super easy. It was like, but I think it really has to do with how you go in there and whether they see your face every week, right? whether they see your face at their counter every week to pick up your check. They don't want to see that. They don't want to see the same people coming back. At least not in Canada, not where I was. And I think it's absolutely abominable that they essentially said to you, well, you should divorce your husband and that way you won't lose your welfare benefits. That's atrocious.
That's the way welfare in the United States started out. In fact, if you had a man in the house or a boy who was old enough to legally get a job in the house, and they were not working, even if it was because they couldn't get a job, you basically were ineligible. And everybody should watch the movie Claudine. If they want to see how that system worked, everybody should watch the movie Claudine. Of course, everybody should just watch that movie because it's got James Earl Jones in it, and anything that he does is gold. But but that movie does give a very accurate portrayal of the kind of hounding that the welfare lady was involved in. And we think you got a man in there, we're going to cut you off.
The hounding, yes, but if we want to be, if we want to be accurate, sorry, the welfare system.
Oh my God!
Now I want to know what you ate.
My daughter would be proud of you.
Yes, I love her. But the welfare system, if we want to talk about how that happened, it began because of farmer subsidies, right? So there was a problem with the farmers being able to sell the rest of their crops that they couldn't sell normally. So that is where the welfare system began. It began as a system to subsidize the farmers. It was not a system designed to subsidize the unfortunate. I mean, it was hand in hand, yes. But we look at it as like help that was given to people because they needed it. But if you want to dig back to the beginnings, the origins of where welfare began, it was not with needy women, it was with needy farmers. And that's an important distinction to make, because farmers were an important and still are an important, part of our lifestyle, our GDP, so there was a distinction to be made. And so welfare as opposed to I'm sorry.
As opposed to other social services?
Are you? Yeah. You're sorry. You're burping.
What happened?
Are you burping?
I am.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
And now.
It's all right. It's all right. I literally made a video recently where, in the middle of the video, my man went and peed with the bathroom door open, and I was like, close the door, the mic doesn't pick up the sound of you peeing. And then I stuck that in at the end of the video.
I guess the one thing that I have to point out with regards to our welfare type social services, it is this: the excuse for the creation of those social services was economic downturns that our country experienced at different times. And a lot of that was actually caused by mistakes made by people in government, and they were progressive initiatives and big government initiatives, government trying to solve individual people's problems.
Right.
And then along comes government. Oh, well, we now have this situation where individual people's problems are bigger than they were before, and they're bigger than people can handle. So we have to have this system.
What do we need
more government government interference in your life and more government. Well, so
we need more and more people. Everyone has to be involved now. It's got to be everyone. It's got to be a unified force against this thing that the government created.
Exactly. So, and it's not to say that poverty only exists because of government. That's not what I'm saying. But insurmountable hardship of that nature does. Prior to government interference and people being able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, government interference in trade, government interference in markets, you wouldn't have had these problems. And welfare just makes it worse. And the problem with our social welfare systems are that they are designed and intended, in my opinion, to stifle people's effort to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. They are designed to make people comfortable with mediocrity in their lives. It's okay with people to never have anything better than that government welfare check and the government version of medical access. The fact that you're going to go to the dentist and the dentist isn't going to actually do anything for your teeth. The fact that you go to the doctor and the doctor is going to manage your symptoms rather than offering you treatment that can eliminate them because your insurance doesn't cover that. The fact that you are never going to have cash in your pocket for entertainment. You're never going to have cash in your pocket for nice things because you're taking the amount the government gives you, which is just, what you can live on. The fact that you're never going to be well educated and understand the things you need to understand in order to get a better job and earn more money. And the fact that you're not going to experience getting that paycheck at the end of a week's work or 2 weeks' work, and the pride of knowing that you paid for everything that you have with your efforts, that you earned it. And those are things that are being taken away from people every time they get handed a welfare check. And it's not that I begrudge people the comfort. It's not that I begrudge people the ability to get, out of the gutter or whatever. It's that I begrudge the government that control over my fellow citizens' ability to actually have real success in their lives. That they are cultivating a class of underlings that they can look down on and control and milk for political power.
And I totally understand and agree with what you're saying, but I don't know how much it is the government's fault. Now I will say this, because the schools are run by government, right? So it is the school's responsibility to teach these children how to become responsible adults once they graduate. However, that is not the curriculum that's not how we quantify them for graduation.
Here's the parents' responsibility to teach kids to be responsible adults. It's the school's ability to teach math and reading and science.
Listen. No. Okay, I reject. Okay, so it should be the parents' responsibility to teach your child about their sexuality. I do not think that it should be the responsibility of the parent to teach a child how to be financially responsible moving forward in their life.
Oh, it absolutely should be.
Well, it should, but I also think that, listen, if we are submitting our children to a government-sponsored education, that at some point they should be taught how to financially be able to take care of themselves.
It's a good argument for eliminating the public school system, honestly.
Okay, it is. But okay, so my kids came home in grade 8, right? In grade fucking 8, with a glossary of terms that include rimming, teabagging, 69ing, right? Okay, a whole bunch of slang, sex. Okay, she-male, stuff like that, right? Describing, defining what those things, right? Grade 8, public school, right? They all took career and life management and never learned what a credit rating was, why you need it, or how you build it, or what it's good for.
Yeah, see now, this is it. If you take a math class, you should learn math. If you take a career and life management class, you should learn real career and life management. But I don't think the school should be in charge of putting every student through those classes.
You know what they learned in career and life management? They learned how to start an activist group.
Oh, God. This is what happens.
They learned what kinds of vanity license plates they might want to have when they get their driver's license, but not how to apply for a driver's license.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
This
is my point. This is what happens when you hand control over your child's education to a federal government system.
It's broken. It is broken, and people do not understand. Parents do not understand just how broken the fucking system is.
It's not broken. It was never meant to be used this way. Well, it's like saying your bicycle is broken because it doesn't operate as a car, and you're trying to use it as a car, and it's not working as a car, therefore it's broken. It's not broken. It's a fucking bicycle.
I mean, I wouldn't say that, and maybe I need to be red-pilled on this, but I wouldn't say that the education system was to mislead children. However, I will say that what is happening now in our education system is absolutely corrupt. This Common Core shit needs to be abolished, and I really would push for more parents to homeschool their children.
I'd say it's a direct result of federalizing the education system. Like, the best thing that could be done with the federal education department, the best thing that could be done would be to abolish it. To just not have a federal department of education at all. We don't need one.
We don't. No, that's a matter for the states, right? And, honestly, essentially, when I look at it, my son, in the schools that he has been in, my youngest in particular, right? Because my older two, they just towed the party line. They just did, they just regurgitated the crap. They knew it was all bullshit. I was telling them it was all bullshit from the moment they brought in climate change freaking information when they were in freaking kindergarten, right? That, okay, well, you have to actually take this with a grain of salt, and you actually have to think about it for yourself, right? And maybe you'll agree with this, maybe you won't. But don't take anything that they're telling you in terms of stuff like this, right? As if it's gospel, because it's not, right? And what I found really interesting is that my son, he's in grade 11 now, and he's written some pretty red pill shit for his social studies and English classes, right? He literally argued that Canada has done too good a job of upholding Indigenous collective rights because there should be no such thing as collective rights, and that the treaties complicate the idea of citizenship for Indigenous people, that if you are exempt from paying taxes, you should not have a vote. Mm-hmm. If you're a status native in your country, which means you're not a full Canadian citizen, you are exempt from taxes, right? You should not have the right to vote. You're not a citizen of Canada. Right? And there you go. And your nation negotiates with Canada. You don't vote in federal elections in Canada. Your nation is supposed to negotiate on your behalf with the federal government of Canada to uphold the treaty agreements. And that's how it's supposed to be. And this was all set in motion by a fucking guy who was certifiably insane, right? Who was the Prince of England at the time. Prince George, I believe. right?
Well, that's what's happening now, right now.
And his teacher gave him like what, 85, something like that, and said he could have been more forthcoming regarding his opinion on the matter. He could have actually been more forceful regarding his opinion on the matter.
So he was too even-handed for the teacher.
Yeah, no, and it's like so my kid can fucking.
That's great.
As long as he explains his reasoning, he's perfectly fine getting marks. You know, like he read what he wanted to me, right? He read out what he wanted to put in as this essay, right, with the points he wanted to make to me, and I said, okay, when you fail, I won't be mad at you, right? When your teacher fails you, I won't be mad at you, right? I'll be proud of you, right? And his teacher didn't fail him, and his teacher said he could have gone even further in proving his point. And I was just blown away. I was blown away. So maybe, at least in Canada, in certain areas, we're at a point where we can maybe see a turnaround coming, right? I think towards common sense and actually being able to speak the truth.
It's partly probably because of the size of your population and how spread out you are.
Yeah, I think it might be certain teachers, certain places.
Well,
I don't think it's that widespread that we can feel comfortable thinking that.
Oh no! Well, the problem is, the issue is that you have teachers, and then you have the curriculum.
Yeah.
Well, and then you have the unions, right? And I don't know about Canada, but in the United States, the teachers' unions are.
Yeah, impossible to get rid of.
It's not that. In the United States, the teachers' unions have been taken over by progressives. And the curriculum isn't just a matter of how do we teach kids math, how do we teach kids science, how do we teach kids reading, what other subjects can we offer, how will they benefit the students, is it going to be good for them to learn Spanish, French, German, Japanese, Latin, whatever. You know, they've stopped considering those things, and it is now all about how can we indoctrinate kids with the progressive political standards?
Oh yeah, no, it's that way too here. Curriculum is very, very much so. I think that my son's teacher probably was like, oh, how refreshing.
Well,
right?
and then there's more. It's how can we keep teachers out of the system who are going to contradict that. So like my son had a great government teacher. He was really an excellent example of what we should have. In that he wanted the students to look at all the angles. He wanted the students to get an accurate view of these are the things that happened in history. These are the things that happen in our government. This is what our government is supposed to be. This is what the Constitution is all that. He had a good teacher in that system, and I was really surprised because the teacher that is kind of the union steward for the junior high and high school. I was one of the room mothers on a field trip where she was sort of in charge of the field trip. And the entire field trip was just a litany of teachers' union issues and progressive issues and what we're not getting from our contract and all that. They almost ignored the kids and only talked about union issues. It was almost like a union meeting. And like I wasn't the only parent that noticed that, and I wasn't the only parent that was upset about it. But there was nothing you can do about it in terms of the public school system other than take your kid and put them in private school. And of course, in the United States, your tax dollars go to pay for the public schools, whether your kids go to school there or not. If you want to send your kids to the private school, your tax dollars still are going to pay for the public school. And then on top of that, you have to pay out of your pocket, or you have to qualify for assistance from the private schools that your kid's attending in order to pay for private schooling. So your choices are either public education or be academically attractive enough to get into a private school, or pay through the nose to put your kid through a private school. So if you're not one of those two things, you're stuck in the public education system with no choice as to the curriculum your child is exposed to. If you can't afford to move to a better public education system, like I'm in a suburb of Dayton. We were not at Dayton Public. Dayton Public has a terrible rating, and part of the problem is the kids that go there are the kids that can't get out, the kids whose families can't get them into a different school, and the system is run politically. The teachers are not happy. The parents are not happy. You have a small segment of parents willing to work with the teachers to try to get the best results for their kids possible. And then you also have the parents that don't care about their children, sending their children to the same school where, as sorry as I feel for those kids, their lack of discipline and their basically Huck Finn style unruly behavior interferes with the education of kids whose parents are trying to get them into a better situation. So it's really a bad situation for all of them. And the federal government's not going to solve that problem. The federal government there's no design in federal government to solve a problem like that. The only people who can solve a problem like that are the local community, and the federal control that is wielded both by the government and by the National Education Association over those schools stymies any effort at reform among the parents that care and the teachers who are there every day. So the system is just fucked.
Yeah, no. Right now here we have something called the Rainbow Unicorn, right? And the Rainbow Unicorn is the mascot handbook on LGBTQ information that is part, right? So you literally have your school teaching, and here's the thing too, right? If a kid comes out to his teacher as trans, I'm trans, the teacher not only has parents, they have no right to inform the parents of that. It's assumed that the kid is coming out to the teacher because they're scared to come to parents, and therefore the teacher is required to keep the student's confidence from the parents. It's kind of like the way abortion stuff is dealt with in. I had a friend in British Columbia and she said, "You ever wonder what it's like to drive your kid down island to get an abortion, right?" And the thing that makes me the most upset about it is I wouldn't have ever known she was pregnant or had an abortion if she hadn't asked me for the ride, because doctors would not have had any right to disclose to me that she had been pregnant or that she'd had an abortion. 13 years old, right? And so we're actually looking at a situation where you have an institution, a government institution, keeping secrets about the children from the parents, right? Not just keeping secrets, but being mandated to keep secrets, right? And you also have them put the rainbow of, LGBTQ, we're going to start indoctrinating the kids into that ideology, that agenda. And I'm not saying, the agenda that, some people are different, so we should accept them. But here's what transphobia is like, right? And here's what microaggressions and all of this other stuff, right, that's attached to it. And here's what cis privilege is. Here's what heteronormative privilege is. And here's what white privilege is. And here's what all of this other shit is, right? And we're having that being fed to our kids in elementary school now, right? But it's part of the freaking curriculum. It's not necessarily what your teachers are choosing to teach the kids. It's mandated that they actually feed the kids stuff, right? And like, so I can guarantee you that at least half the teachers at my kids' high school, grade 8 to 12, back when we were in BC, my older two, right? That about half the teachers probably felt did rim jobs and
okay, Karen,
rusty
repeat
trauma.
that thing.
Sorry,
Repeat that last thing. Half the teachers felt what?
I think half the really uncomfortable handing a glossary of terms to their eighth grade students that included terms like rim jobs and rusty trombones and teabagging and 69ing and, you know, and all of this other crap. Ass to mouth.
Oh, hello.
Yeah. Ass to fucking mouth on this glossary. I'm pretty sure that there were teachers at that school who really kind of embarrassed and awkward and uncomfortable and maybe had some reservations about the morality of grade students, a glossary of terms that included those kinds of things, right? I understand that these kids are watching porn on the internet, but probably shouldn't be telling them what ass to mouth is, what
Okay, Karen, you're going to have to stop for a minute.
Okay,
I'm going to have to explain something to everybody. All right, so what's going on with the audio and the reason that Karen's cutting out every other word is because my computer, specifically this computer, not the Wi-Fi router, not my service from the street. No, let me finish. Don't interrupt. Don't interrupt. You got to listen because I got to explain this. I need to actually say a full sentence without having somebody jump in. So what's going on? The reason that every other word you're losing is because my computer, the specific computer that I am on, the Wi-Fi access and the actual usage is fluctuating from like between almost 4,000 kilobytes per second to 0. And it's basically just, so I'm watching OBS. It's green, yellow, red, orange, red, yellow, green, yellow, red, orange, and it's that fast. And I'm watching the same thing on Discord, where the little thing that tells you voice connected, it goes back and forth every couple of seconds from green to yellow to red, back up to yellow to green. And it's just, the whole thing is my internet, and it's not even a problem with my internet server. It's this computer, the Dell computer that I am using. Something is, and I even looked in the task manager. There isn't something running in the background causing this. It's not doing an update. It's not running a antivirus. It's not any of that. But for some reason, every time Karen tries to talk, my computer goes haywire and just starts doing this shit.
All right, well, I'll bow out then for now.
And it can't be at your end, though. That's the frustrating thing about it. It's only happening with my Wi-Fi on what, like, I don't even understand.
Karen, it just hates Karen.
Well, and the bad thing is, right, it doesn't have this computer.
It's got the
This computer doesn't have an Ethernet port, so I have to rely on Wi-Fi. I can't use Ethernet to hook this computer up to the internet. I don't know if there's a USB manner of doing that, but that's when people are asking this question: why is Karen dropping out every other word? Karen's dropping out every other word because the computer I am using sucks. So just for the record,
that's why you should get an.
That's why I should get an Apple. That's Karen says. So I'm going to go through and work on the super chats again, because for some reason it seems to be able to at least broadcast things that are coming directly from this computer right now, and we will try to limp through the rest of this show. But if you get cutting out like that, that's what's going on. Apparently, my computer's Wi-Fi receiver is allergic to other honey badgers. It's still doing it. I'm watching it in OBS. It's still doing it. It's still dropping and rising and dropping and rising, and it's going all the way down to nothing. That just blows my mind. So, from the beginning, since we read the first comment but not the first super chat, Mr. Roboto gave us $2 and said, "What have I missed?" Asked Karen his mid-story. And my answer to that is go back and watch from the beginning and you'll know. Then we have Q Brother Soulstar, who I think commented while listening maybe to the opener. I had addressed this after the opener played, but he said, no, it's 7 women. And that's correct. At this point, it is 7 women. 7 women who have victim narratives, but not necessarily accusations. They're not accusing Biden of being rapey or anything like that. They're just saying he's outdated and out of touch and clueless, which is why he's touching wrong, and all this stuff. And honestly, 6 of them, their narratives aren't real victim narratives. Only the one that accused him of sniffing her hair and kissing the back of her head really has anything to make much of a big deal about. And that's 1 out of 7. And there's her narrative matches up to what people assumed about one of the viral images going around regarding Biden. That the context of that image contradicts that assumption. So it's 7 women, but they're the accusation. I still think the accusations are questionable. Biden has problems, but of all of the things to criticize him for, this is really not that high up on my list. I am more interested in criticizing his quarter of a century of attacks on other men's due process rights. Mr. Roboto gave us $5 and says, "Me Too will kill any viable Dem candidate, giving guys like Donald Trump power and no resistance in a high election because of discomfort." And that's another good point. Republicans aren't really as vulnerable to the Me Too movement as Democrats are in one way. A Democrat will apologize and try to move on. Democrats will accept being accused. They cannot question an accusation even when it's false. They have to pay homage to her truth, right? They have to pay homage to the female victim narrative. And at least Republican candidates can turn around and say, no, I didn't do that. That's a lie. And their constituents and their political colleagues are not going to say, you can't say that. You have to believe women because it's not a Republican idea. Democrats are kind of screwing themselves there. The socialist progressive stack and the believe women mantra are going to pretty much eat the party alive. Miles Kinslow gave us $10. Miles Kinslow gave us $2 and said, "Speaking of Warren, there is now a political group called Stop Pocahontas formed to hound her." I hope Democrats choke on their stupid identity politics. Yeah, they already are. And the LSP 92 has a point, except for rhinos, Republicans in name only. And yeah, they're going to be a problem. French Honey Badger gave us $5 and said, "Dishonest politicians trying to fool people into supporting their regime. Color me shocked." Yeah, aren't we all? Meredith Glassberg gave us $5 and said, "Keep in mind, the first person to accuse Biden was a Beto supporter, and the second was a Bernie supporter. The takedown by Biden's own party." Or they taken down by Biden's own... And that's true. His first 2 accusers were from competitors. In fact, Bernie Sanders actually had to come out and say, no, this was not my idea. I'm not stoking this. I didn't suggest this. I'm not promoting it. This didn't come from me. So, because people were saying, oh, this is just Bernie babes trying to take down a competing politician. And no, it's like Biden has, at the very least, at the absolute nicest regarding the whole thing about Biden, he's been socially awkwardly overly handsy and caused discomfort for years among some women. At the very least, that's the nicest thing that can be said about him.
That is the nicest thing that you can absolutely. You are such a diplomat in saying that, because
That's the
that
nicest.
yes, that is the nicest way that you can explain that situation. But it's just Hannah, don't give him any kind of platitude.
Oh no, you
What?
mean latitude, and yeah, he deserves the benefit of innocent until proven guilty, just like any other man.
Yes.
What bugs
Yes.
me is that he doesn't give other men that benefit. But
Right.
there is the other end of it. At worst, Karen's right. At worst, he could be considered a sexual predator in hiding.
Right.
You know, somebody that is using, well, I'm just awkward, I don't understand signals and blah blah blah, to get away with feeling people up, both sexes, in public,
I mean, but
and
that-
children. So
that
there's
would
also
be a
that.
lie. That would be a lie, because he is not. I think he is at the point where he is not. So he does not any. It's all excuses just to be able to get away with this behavior. It's not any kind of conflation with, oh, this is just him being conciliatory towards females. You know, he's it's not just him trying to be nice and accommodating towards
Well,
females.
look at it this way, right? You know, when you're in France, and you greet, foreign leader of the opposite sex, and sometimes same sex, right? Women and women in particular, but sometimes men and men too. What do? You give the double cheek kiss,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
In Australia, that was something that actually took me aback a little bit, was the single cheek kiss, right? From both men and women. You didn't see men doing that with men, but you saw men doing that with women, and women doing that with men, and women doing that with women, right? Single cheek kiss, right? And those are the cultural norms of how things go, right? So of course, if everybody's doing it, it's understood as just a platonic gesture, right? Then everybody's going to be comfortable with it because it's just what's normal in their culture, right? But when you look at, hair sniffing and rubs and, kisses on the cheek from behind in particular, which is actually kind of, I think, what makes so much of it seem really creepy, is it's not kisses on the cheek.
It looks predatory.
Within the context of American culture, right? I mean, there are some cultures that are more touchy-feely than others, right? There are some cultures where a pat on the bum is not a big deal, right? Because it's understood. And there are cultures where a woman going around with her breasts bare, right, is not a sexual act. It's just what the women do, right? That is just how the women dress, right? Like in Tahiti prior to British, contact and stuff like that, right? So you look at that, a woman walking around in a not a grass skirt, but in a skirt with her breasts bare would not be seen as anything sexual at all, right? But you take that and you put that in modern day America, and a woman walking around with, a skirt and her breasts bare down the streets of New York, that's going to be seen as something completely not normative. It's going to be seen as some kind of some kind of attempt to get sexual attraction from men, sexual attention from men, right? And so when you look at it in the context of what is expected in the corporate environment, what is expected in the professional environment, in terms of, like Ontario's premier put out a bunch of PSAs, like I had vignettes of men doing exactly sexual harassment and asking men to in the workplace to intervene when they see it happening, right? So we're talking about cultural talking about just like it would be very, very strange for somebody around with their hair uncovered on the right, a woman, right, and that would maybe be seen something an overtly sexual signal. Well, you know, and men are not allowed to touch women in that culture unless they're related to them. So Joe Biden would be like up shit creek without a fucking paddle there, right? But we're looking at cultural norms, and where does behavior fit in the context of culture? And in the context of cultural norms, particularly since it absolutely stands out as egregiously inappropriate. Right? And I'm just talking about his behavior. It does not fit with the standards of this place and time as dictated by his fucking party.
No predatory, no
There is
nothing.
a way. There is a way.
It wouldn't matter. There's
The same habit.
There's
And
no
get-
pathway. There's no pathway for your average Joe to get the same due process, to get the same presumption of innocence. If it was completely 100%, Biden is not doing anything malicious or not doing anything that the women should feel victimized by. If that was the case, right? If that was the case, now everybody's saying they can't hear me. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Because like everybody else can. Okay, and now everybody's saying it's fixed. Okay. No, so what I was basically saying is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether this is the most innocent it can possibly be. Whether the situation with Biden is the most innocent it could possibly be, or the most guilty it could possibly be. Whether it is the least damaging it could possibly be, or the most damaging it could possibly be. Because your average Joe, as opposed to this Joe, right? Your average Joe doesn't have a pathway to get treated the way Biden is getting treated with respect to this. Your average Joe doesn't have benefit of the doubt. Your average Joe gets shoved out of every interaction with other human beings because of this kind of behavior. Whether it is a clash of cultures, whether it is hidden predatory nature, nobody ever gets the chance to find out, right? Because if you do it, you're creepy. If he does it, he might just be clueless. But if you do it, you're creepy. And if you do it, feminists are going to say you're a monster. And they'll say that you could accidentally rape somebody, right? If you're clueless, you need to be taught not to rape. If you're clueless, you don't understand women's boundaries. If you're clueless, you don't understand consent. You just need to be taught the right thing. But if you screw up before you're taught the right thing, if you really are that clueless, and you do something and then you learn better, it doesn't matter. You're a monster for the rest of your life, and no matter what you have rehabilitated to, no matter what you have become after the fact, you must be viewed as what you were before. You must be viewed as that rapey monster, and you can never get back into society. That's the standard that you face. So the Bidens of the world, the thing that really pisses me off about this is not so much that this guy might be getting, away with behavior that he shouldn't be getting away with. It's that he's getting away with behavior that you can't get away with. It's that he's getting away with behavior that if my husband or my brother or my son was seen as doing any of these things, whether they did it or not, they would be condemned. There would be no pathway out. And I consider that to be very wrong. And the worst part of it is, that standard that's in place today, he was very instrumental in getting that standard into place. He is the architect of the legal manifestation of that standard. And it's not applying to him. That pisses me off. I think...
Agreed.
I think...
I was going to say,
Agreed.
I think everybody... I shut everybody off there, didn't I?
Could not have said it better. Yeah. Absolutely.
And I hope that the Republican Party picks up on that problem and runs with it.
The hypocrisy, right? Like, because I don't necessarily think that, you know, they should be, and I've done a bunch of radio shows about this, right? And I've said, like, I'm not going to speak to intent. I'm not going to speak to the idea that he's a predator, or that maybe behind closed doors doing things that are egregious or more inappropriate than what he's done in front of cameras, right? But I will say that, you know, according to him and his support of consent laws, you don't put your hands on a woman until you have her consent. You just don't do it, right? You don't do anything that could be interpreted as unwanted by the woman until you have her consent, right? And he may be of the opinion that, well, my sexual platonic, they're just friendly, they're just grandfatherly, they're just affectionate, right? Yeah, well, you know, that's not necessarily how women do them, and you have set up a standard where the only thing that matters is women receive what you do, right? How they receive it, how they interpret it, right? You're not allowed to question their interpretation of your actions, right? You just have to freaking believe the woman. That's part of what you put in place, Joe Biden. And you touched all of those women without getting their express verbal consent first. And if any of them interpreted those touches as sexual in nature and unwanted, then you are essentially in violation of the want to make the law of the land, not just on college campuses in New York State and California, but the law of the land, affirmative consent, part of the model penal code, being pushed to become legislation, being pushed to be passed, to become the law of the entire United States, applicable in criminal courts, affirmative consent. You never asked any of those women if it was okay to touch them. You never once fucking asked a single one of them, right? And if any one of them interprets the way you touched them as even remotely sexual, then by your standards, we have to believe her, and your intent does not matter, right? You are as guilty as a guy who frickin' felt up a woman on the subway. That is really where you want to take the law, Joe Biden.
Yeah, well, he's been instrumental in numerous attacks on due process throughout history. He wrote the Violence Against Women Act. He spent years getting it considered by Congress. He specifically fought to replace the standards laid out in the genderless standards laid out in the Family Violence Prevention and Services Act of '84 with the gender discriminatory standards in the Violence Against Women Act that he wrote. And, of course, with the due process attack that is contained in the Violence Against Women Act. And, you know, we got commenters saying that he was also part of the Patriot Act and, let's see, the assault weapons ban also. And that, if that's true, it does not surprise me at all. But it indicates to me that his career has been about removing the citizens' protections against corrupt government domination and corrupt government legal attacks. Essentially, you can't protect yourself against being deemed a criminal, even when you're not a criminal, in order to shut you up. That strikes me as deliberate. And I think what's happening now is Biden is outdated. Nobody needs him anymore, and he's being thrown under the bus. They tolerated the behavior that we're now seeing widely ridiculed and cited and described and everything. They tolerated that behavior because they wanted to get the things done that he was good at getting done. And now they don't have to have him to get those things done. And so, and then of course those things are established in law and policy now, so why would they need him to get them done? And so, now they can tear him to shreds. And I guess that's what's going to happen with him. So going on to the next super chat, we have Catherine Scully gave us $5 Canadian and said, Beto O'Rourke not only stands for things, but on things like counters and other places people eat. Yeah. If you're on Minds.com, I am Onero's grip on Minds, just like I am on Twitter. I have a video on my profile called the Beto Jive. At the beginning of the Beto Jive, I combined him climbing up the counter with Pee Wee Herman climbing up on the bar in Pee Wee's Big Adventure. And it's just like, that's the first thing I thought of when I saw that. The video is real short. I'm not putting it on YouTube because it'll get taken down. But it's up on Minds, and just watch it. His hand motions and his manner of speaking and his style are all just... he just... like I said, dude, where's my campaign?
I know you are, but what am I?
Yeah, where's your campaign, dude? I know you were, but what am I? He's like a walking meme. But in any case, yeah.
Oh, he's just absolutely fucking ridiculous.
Like, I kind of hope they run him.
I'm just like, what are you doing? You're chopping the air. I keep getting reminded of this video by Gavin McInnes, 10 Things Wrong with Kids These Days, right? And you think it's like all about teenagers, but no, it's all about toddlers, right? And he's like, you're not, right? You think you're fast and you do this thing with your arms, like, and you think that makes you fast? Like, no, like my legs are longer than your body, right? I let you win. And, but you think you're like whipping the air with your arms, right? With your little noodle arms. And every time I see Beto O'Rourke, talking, I think of that Gavin McInnes video. Everybody should go watch it, called 10 Things Wrong with Kids These Days.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's fucking hilarious. Absolutely fucking hilarious.
Yeah, and then the other thing you should watch is I can't think of the actual name of the song. Everybody's heard about the bird. Shoot, I can't think of it. The song has an actual name.
Surfin' Bird.
Surfin' Bird. Yeah, you watch the original video to Surfin' Bird and watch in the middle the dancing that the singer does. It kind of reminds me of Beto O'Rourke also. But yeah, so that's like I said. I hope they run him. I really do, because the memes will be great. It'll be fun. We'll all have a blast, and he'll lose spectacularly, but probably they'll run one of the women because they haven't learned that's not an automatic win. Let's see. French Honey Badger gave us $10 and said, voting on Green New Deal was silly. First, she said not to vote on it to Democrats. Second, it's not an actual law. It's just a platform, so why vote on it? Well, the point of voting on it was to show that a law based on that platform would be ridiculous and wouldn't get the votes even from the Democratic Party. And that ended up being exactly what was shown. It's lip service. They're never going to actually do any of the things in that platform. If they did, they would destroy the entire country, and we would be in a shambles. We'd be in a condition of Venezuela really quickly. If the government wasn't overthrown by the people.
Yeah, which makes me wonder why she was so upset that nobody voted for it. It's like, well, you said it was non-binding. You said it was just a bunch of ideas that you were kicking around, and nobody voted for it because it's not a law. And then you're like, how dare you not vote for this? You hate your children.
Yeah, no, it really kind of demonstrated that nothing that they say is really solid. It's not set in stone. They don't mean
Oh my
anything.
God! Anybody who's like, let me say again, go to Mr. Reagan's videos on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the brains behind her, right? Which is the Justice Democrats and Brand New Congress, and which Cenk Uygur was affiliated with, but which is the brainchild of a guy named Lee, who's the son of a billionaire, right? Who's funding the whole fucking thing, and who says, why shouldn't we hack democracy to take over the government, right? Okay, this is like, and he like, there are recordings of him saying this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And somehow we've all been obsessed with this whole Trump collusion thing that, you know, has amounted to freaking a giant freaking nothing burger, right? When we have evidence of people saying, let's hack democracy to take over the government for socialism, right? All funded by the fucking idle rich son of a billionaire who just really to be in charge, right? And nobody's fucking looking at it, right? Okay, there's some investigations into financial irregularities, but nobody has anybody who's listening heard the name Zach Exley? I don't know that you have if you're watching Mr. Reagan's videos.
You know that
Right?
the dumb thing is that news story came out about the same time as this Biden stuff, and it's barely gotten a mention even on Fox. Fox has made hay with the Biden thing, and like there's been two distinct pathways they're taking now. Because you got Tucker Carlson has actually apologized for making hay, and it's like he never apologizes for anything, but he apologized for that because he feels it was wrong, and he's like, I don't want this to be the way we do politics, and so I apologize for stoking that fire. And then right after his show, Sean Hannity comes on and does what? Stokes the shit out of it. So there's like two different pathways they're taking there. And I think some of the gals are going one way and some of the gals are going the other way. But barely any of them said word one about the fraud, essentially the political fraud that AOC's campaign has engaged in. And I'm kind of wondering partly now if this Biden thing, the reason that Biden's being thrown under the Me Too bus is because if everybody's talking about Joe Biden and what a blandly creepy guy he might be, and speculating as to whether he's really creepy, or whether he's just kind of creepy, or whether he just looks creepy, but he's not actually creepy, right? Or and all these speculations regarding Biden. If everybody's focused on that, what are we not noticing? You know, is this the only thing we're not noticing? Is this the only thing we're not talking about? Or are there other scandals that are coming out? You know, we're not really talking so much about the Mueller report right now, are we? Because Biden's on the front page, so the Mueller report isn't. And I think that's the one hand being waved while the other hand is picking your pocket or coming around to smack you upside the head. And that's the other end of the discussion. Now, it doesn't mean that, you know, we can't be mad about the double standard and discuss the issue once. But, you know, this is probably the only episode I'm going to do on it. I don't, unless something comes out that really necessitates more further discussion on the topic. But going on, we have, let's see, to be more like, that was Fringe Honey Badger gave us $5 and says, to be more like Sweden, you need to deregulate massively. Welfare does not work, by the way, it's just rotting, and they've been walking it back since the 70s. And then we have Sits Like In You gave us $10 and said, screw it, here's 10 just for the belch. Anth Bobo gave us $2 Canadian, said, I'm Italian, and we double cheek kiss. You know, actually, if you look at some of the older movies in the United States as well, we've had throughout our history different social subcultures in which it was more normal for everybody in the social environment to, when they greet women, kiss them on the cheek, and even on the lips. And you see it in old movies, you see it in like old documentaries where people greet each other and everything. It was like women were much more physically demonstrative in terms of affection for the people around them, and women would come up and kiss their friends, and it was there was something wrong with you if you didn't show physical affection for the women in your social circle. And I don't know if American culture has gone through fluctuations of being very demonstrative and very uptight, very open and partyish, and very reserved, and the idea that being open and partyish was more sophisticated was more prominent during some time periods, and then the idea that being free with your touch towards other people was a baser, a redneck kind of thing, was more prevalent in other times. So you kind of had fluctuations throughout history in how people would perceive it. For instance, if a man, when greeting a woman, were to put his hands on her arms or her shoulders and kiss her on the cheek, or to put his arms around someone who was not his wife, not his sister, not a really close friend, and kiss her on the cheek or the top of the head. And like, I don't know what Biden's social culture was like growing up, or his, any of the things that he'd been through. But again, it could very easily be that he has lived a different social culture than the people that are criticizing him. So I'm okay with leaving open for that. I still think it's very strange that a man in politics would go 30 years in his career making women visibly and dramatically uncomfortable, and nobody would say, hey man, when people lean away from you, that means that they don't want you to touch them, and nobody would say, look, if you gotta grab people in order to get close to them, then they probably have a larger personal space allotment in their minds than you're giving them. I just cannot imagine that nobody said anything to him, and that bothers me about this. But it could go either way, and again, to me, it's not the most what implications it has regarding Biden is not the most important aspect of this, because I think one way or another this is going to kill his political career, at least his political advancement. But what really is, to me, is relevant is his history of attacks on the due process rights of other men, and the fact that he's been the architect of that double standard, where, however it's going to affect him, what little effect he's going to experience from it, it's nothing compared to how it would affect you, if you were in the same situation. And that bothers me immensely. So, but I think we have kind of discussed the Biden topic to its end. I think we've pretty much covered everything. We've covered the history of it. We've covered the fact that feminists threw other women whose complaints were actual feminist issues under the bus in order to support Biden's push for a gender discriminatory version of an existing federal law. And I think we've covered the double standard, like we've tromped all over the double standard. We've covered the possibility that, this could be innocent, the remote possibility this could be entirely innocent, and we've covered the possibility that this could be, predatory, and the fact that, is this really how we want to run our elections? Do we want our candidates that get voted into office to be decided by, who is or is not the most vulnerable to getting Me Too'd? Or do we want to hire people based on Because when you're voting people in, you are hiring a servant, a civil servant. Do we want to hire our civil servants based on their campaign intentions, their promises, and whether or not their party has a history of keeping those promises? Do we want the issues to be the determining factor in our elections? My opinion on that is I do. I want the issues to be the determining factor. I want to vote for people or vote against people based on what they are going to do once they get into office, not based on how many women come forward and say, I'm uncomfortable with this man's hands on my shoulders and my back, and I don't like that, because I don't see any possibility other than that's going to lead to false allegations being the norm as a tactic in elections coming forward. So I don't know if either of my co-hosts have anything further to say on that. Have I lost everybody else?
No, you haven't. Well, I'm in the.
I know you're in an argument with French honey badger and
Yeah, I am in an argument with
and
dinner
Pakistan.
and frequently shutting my pushing the hush button on my smoke detector because I'm cooking. So.
Oh boy.
And that's what happens with range hood.
Yeah. Well, my smoke detector, if there's steam from boiling water in my apartment, my smoke detector goes off. So we have to cover ours every time we cook too.
We used to have our smoke detector hooked up to an alarm system, and it was the alarm system people, when they came in and installed it, they installed it right outside the kitchen, not outside the bedrooms at the end of the hallway where you're supposed to, but right outside the kitchen. So every time I cooked, it didn't matter how fast I got to the panel, right? The alarm panel.
Yeah.
To essentially deactivate the fire trucks had been dispatched, and once they're dispatched, they are not allowed to be recalled until they have examined the scene.
Yeah.
So I was cooking dinner, and 3 times my house, and the firemen were very, very nice about it. They were like, "Oh yeah, no, I understand. I get it. Why did they put the smoke detector there? Also, whatever you're cooking smells really good." But we got a notice from the city that we were going to start getting charged $370 per.
Well, yeah, because every time they show up, it costs a lot of money for them to show up.
And I was just like, essentially, I was just like, I phoned the alarm company and I said, "You're going to like disable this feature now." Right? Like, I didn't ask for this. I inherited this. I had no frickin' idea that if I fry a steak, there's going to be fire trucks coming to my house and stop them. Right? Like, I had no frickin' clue. But you're going to deactivate that part of my plan. Thanks.
Yeah.
And they did. And then their alarm panel started going, just ripped it out of the and told it to stop taking money.
There you go. You know, the whole thing is dumb. Most house fires do start either in the kitchen or from a space heater or from smoking in bed. But your alarm system only does you any good if you can use it without having more false alarms than real ones. It's kind of like, your laws in your society. They only do any good if you can, keep them in place without having more false allegations than real ones.
Yeah, no, I actually, oh God, I feel so retarded about this too. A few months ago, I had thought, right? I had literally picked up a packet of meat at the store and put it in my cart. And then I was like, oh, this is a little too expensive. And I put it back, right? But I thought that I had bought it. So I put a pan on the stove with oil in it and turned it on. And I went, it's like, oh, meat. And then I didn't think I have to turn that burner off before I go to the store to buy that meat, right? That I was going to buy but didn't buy. So I go to the store, and then I get home, front door, back door, and all the windows are open, and my sons are standing outside, right? And the copper bottom of my pot is like separated from the rest of it.
Oh boy.
And
Oh boy.
and the inside of the pot is black from oil, and the entire house is just filled with smoke. And they're standing out there, right? They were downstairs, and when the smoke detector went off, and they were like, "What the hell?" And then the smoke burning oil started, rolling downstairs, and it was just like a millimeter of oil on the bottom of the pan. Boy, when that heats up, it sure does.
Yeah, you're lucky. My mom had a fire from something like that, very similar to that, actually.
You know what?
And it burst into flames. It almost set their whole kitchen on fire.
It would have been contained because it was a millimeter of oil. It was like just what you would put to fry a steak or something, right? On the bottom of the pan. If it had caught on there, and then it was a deep saucepan, right?
Right.
So it would have remained contained in the pan. If it had caught on fire, it wouldn't have caught anything else on fire. There wouldn't have been high flames or anything like that. But yeah, I was just like, oh, sorry.
Yeah,
sorry, boys.
In my workplace, we have training related to this, and one of the things they say is, if you so much as, like, I'm a direct support professional for intellectually disabled adults, so some people can do their own cooking with supervision, some people can even do their own cooking without supervision, and then some people you have to do their cooking for them. We are not supposed to walk away from a heated cooking surface if we're supervising or if we're cooking at all. Like, not even to go get something from the other room without turning it off. Like, if somebody knocks on the door and you just have to go unlock the door and let them in and come back, you still have to turn it off. If the dryer buzzes and you're just pulling the laundry out for somebody to fold and put it in a basket, you have to turn it off. You have to turn the stove off. And it's because you just that's the necessity for preventing a kitchen fire, and under any circumstances, because it's just like they happen so fast. And if you're not using a deep pan like that, it takes seconds for your wallpaper to catch fire. Wallpaper paste is pretty flammable, especially in some of the older houses and everything too. So if your wallpaper is old and dried out, and there's a thing you can actually get to put around a little stick up, like you would put up those stick up lights, but it actually is a fire extinguisher that, it has one of those little wax thingies that sticks out, and if it gets too hot, it melts and it opens up, and the powder will come out of the fire extinguisher and extinguish the fire. Some homes have those, some stoves come with those, and so on. And like, I think everybody ought to just have those. Don't buy a smoke detector to put next to your kitchen. Buy something to put over your stove that will extinguish the fire, because your kitchen fires almost always start on the stovetop. But instead you get the situation Karen described, where the fire the fire detector, the smoke detector, goes off. And it's probably because instead of people making the decisions themselves and doing their own research and buying stuff that suits their needs, you have an authority over apartment complexes and how they're run, how housing is done. This is how it has to be done in all of the apartments.
I lived in a where the smoke detector was right outside the bathroom, and every time I got out of the shower, the smoke detector would go off.
That's even dumber because fires are a lot less likely to start unless you're using a space heater in your bathroom. Then you might have a problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like, usually a shower door, the bathroom door is close to the bedroom doors, right?
Yeah.
But it was always right outside the bathroom door, and then you would essentially be showering, and your smoke detector would go off, and you'd have to leap out, wrap a towel around yourself, and go hush the push the hush button.
And the stupidity of
regulations.
Regulations.
Yeah. Well, you know,
one size never fits all.
One size never fits all.
And you couldn't, right? Like, because it was actually wired into the ceiling.
Ours are too.
Which made me think, okay, so when the power goes out and I'm using candles, and I actually have a fire hazard, my smoke detector won't work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's correct. So, yeah. So, once again, there's no cookie cutter solutions. But, you know, and that relates back to our story again, like I said before. You know, Biden is kind of the king of cookie cutter solutions to that require the dumping of due process rights. So it's not just the circumstances under which he did that are wrong. It's wrong in the school system. It's wrong in housing. It's wrong in pretty much everything. The idea that cookie cutter solutions make life better, and big government solves all your problems. Somehow we're gonna have to get away from that. But with that, I think I'm going to thank my co-hosts for sticking it out. We have a 3-hour-long sausage again. Thank you all for listening to the entire 3-hour-long sausage. And a big thank you to everybody that works in the background of HBR Talk to make it happen. And and Doc, who's going to have to deal with the 3-hour sausage after the fact.